call this meeting to order. My name is Ron Chatta, Committee Chair for today's meeting. This is a meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. The Committee of Adjustment is composed of 5 citizen members who are appointed by Brampton City Council. The committee is authorized by the Ontario Planning Act to consider applications for minor variance from the provision of the City of Brampton zoning bylaw. The committee also consider application for consent, sometime referred to as land division applications, which includes severing a new lot from an existing lot, a lot addition, easement, mortgages, or lease in excess of 21 years. My first request to ask those present to ensure that all cell phone and other electronic devices to turn off or place on a non-audible mode during the meeting. I would like to introduce the committee members. To my immediate left, Ms. Desiree Doffler. To my far left, Mr. Robert Crouch. And my name is Ron Chatta, Committee Chair for today's meeting. And we have regrets from Mr. Richard Nurse. Seated at the table to the right side of the committee, Ms. Ginny Myers, Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment. And seated near the podium, we have city staff members who will assist the committee today. Now I will ask the staff to make their introduction. Staff, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, my name is Elizabeth Corzola. I'm the Manager of Zoning and Sign Bylaw Services.
I'm Shelby Swinfield, Development Planner.
Kevin Freeman, Development Planner.
Adam Farr, Manager Development Review.
Thank you. Before we consider today's application, the committee has some procedural matter to take care of. The first is the minutes of the previous meeting, are the adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting held on May 8, 2018. The minutes of the previous meeting are presented in today's agenda. Committee members, are there any concern about these minutes?
I have no concerns about the minutes, but I was not in attendance at the meeting.
Okay.
So I don't know that we have quorum to resolve that issue.
We do, in that we have 2 members that can still vote out of the 3.
But the member who was not present, can he still move the motion?
It would be advisable, through you, Mr. Chair, would be advisable that he not move the motion, and if committee wants to bring the minutes back at the next meeting, they certainly can do that as well.
Okay, so I would like to move this motion. And seconded by
That the member Crouch did not attend. Do we make a note about that?
Through you, if I can just seek clarification, are we putting a motion on the floor to move these, have these minutes brought forward at the next meeting, or are we?
No, we are going ahead with, we are adopting the minutes. But if there is amendment required, I would certainly.
Through
like
you,
to do
Mr.
that.
Chair, there is no amendment required.
Okay,
You know.
so I would like to move my motion to adoption of the minutes meeting held on May 8, 2018. Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so now the next is declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Does any member have a declaration of pecuniary interest to declare on any matter being discussed today?
Mr. Chair, I must declare a conflict with regard to 15 Melanie, trying to find the application number, as my past law firm has represented the applicant.
Okay, no problem. So,
18,052.
yes. Any other? None? So, no problem. Now we move on to withdrawals and deferrals. So for this meeting, we do have a written request for application number A18083. Is there anybody, sorry, the agent is here for this application? Please go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, city staff, members of the public. My name is Mark Denardis, a planning associate from Gagnon Walker Domes Urban Planners. We act on behalf of the owner of 50 Wentworth Court. We filed an application for a minor variance application on May 1st requiring 4 variances to permit the operation of a concrete batching plant on the property. We reviewed the city staff report and comments from the TRCA as well as the Region Appeal. And at this time, we would like to ask committee that they grant a deferral of 2 hearings. We would like to see the application reconsidered at committee on July 10th.
Okay. Committee members, is there any question? Seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience to speak on this application? Seeing none. Staff, could you please weigh in your comments regarding this deferral?
Through Mr. Chair, staff are of the position that there's nothing associated with this application that would justify deferral at this time. Staff's position that remains as a recommendation for refusal.
Okay, so committee, I would like to deal with this application as the agent is requesting to defer until the July the 10th, 2018.
Mr. Chair, through you, having read the staff report with regard to the 4 tests under the Planning Act and the comments of conservation, I move to refuse the application.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think right now the debate should focus around whether or not this application will be deferred. In the event it is not deferred, the application will be placed back on the agenda to be heard in the order as presented. Okay, so right now we're just looking to determine whether or not will be considering a request to defer the application.
Could I ask the applicant, I know in your written request for deferral, you've suggested that you'd like further consultation with staff and the authorities. If the city has just made a comment that the word was to refuse, even though the report says approved in part, but be that as it may, do you think you'll have some successful conversations with the city?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe there's merit in at least in one deferral. This has been an onerous exercise for our client, and we've gone through some consultation in the spring months of this year, and having just received the report last week, we think there's at least one more opportunity to have a further discussion with city staff on the planning process. I do note that the comments from the TRCA and the Region Appeal, they support the application. They have no opposition. So it seems like the only authority here that's refusing the application is the City of Brampton. We don't seem to agree on 2 of the variances that are being requested. We know that they're giving a partial approval, and we think a deferral is warranted here.
Okay. So with that, Ms. Doffler, would you like to put forward any motion? Is that satisfied your question?
It does. I would put forward a motion to defer until July 10th.
Okay, so motion on the table to defer this application for 50 Wentworth Court for July the 10th. I would quickly ask Ms. Myers, is that for July the 10th is okay, Ms. Myers, for the circulation purpose?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that time frame does provide adequate time for circulation of public notices.
Okay. So we have a motion here by Ms. Duffer to defer this application for July the 10th. Do we have seconder? I'll second this motion. All in favor? Motion carried. So this application is deferred for July the 10th, 2018.
Thank you.
Do we have any other application or any other agent for any other deferral?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, since I'm at the mic here, I would also like to ask a request for deferral on application A 18081. We filed the application as well on May 1st, requiring 6 variances. The application is to facilitate the construction of a single detached custom home. The property is a challenging site, and we have reviewed the staff recommendation report as well as comments from the CVC and the Region Appeal, and staff are recommending a deferral, which we are agreeable to. We would like to see the application reconsidered at committee on June 19th or July 10th. June 19th might be a little bit tight, but, you know, we're in committee's disposed at this point, so.
Okay, committee members, is there any concern or question regarding this request? Seeing none, anyone in the audience for application A 18081, 8256 Credit View Road? Seeing none, staff, could you please weigh in regarding this application?
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff would be in support of a deferral request to the July 10th meeting would be most appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, I'm sorry. Excuse me. It's Michael Gagnon with Gagnon Walker Domes. I want to make it clear in the record, the request for this deferral was
by the staff?
initiated by staff.
Yeah.
And I think it behooves staff going forward to show some respect for applicants when they ask for a similar consideration. Shame on staff.
Mr. Gagnon, in my opinion, these two applications are two separate applications, and we do understand where you're coming from. But again, the first application was completely different, and in my opinion, staff, even the written correspondence I have, the staff requested the deferral in this application.
They
So-
did, and we accommodated their request.
Yes.
But on the previous application, we made a similar request.
Mr. Gagnon, I would like
It's
to
the
remind
same
you.
department.
If you please allow me to speak, I do appreciate that you're coming forward, and I do understand that you are there for many, many years working with the city.
Over 30.
Yes, I do understand. It's a little bit less than my age. But at the same time, I would remind you, please, that the previous meeting, the previous application, we already dealt with. So if you would like to speak anything regarding this application put forward, please. Otherwise,
Well, I'd like to thank the committee for accommodating the staff request, and we've also accommodated their request. And after today's meeting, I will be getting in touch with the clerk's department regarding the integrity commissioner, and I'd like to get in touch with that person. Thank you.
so, no problem. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just want to add one thing to Mr. Gagnon's comments about A 18081. The deferral by city staff is hinging on the delay of comments from the CVC. I understand that they were issued last Thursday on the 24th, and that was the same day the city staff's report was due to clerks. It's not my responsibility nor my clients to go chase down comments from the CVC. We submit the applications on the filing deadline, and it's their responsibility to get in touch with the Conservation Authority and make sure that they have comments in time so that they can write a report. So on that basis alone, I think a deferral is warranted here, and I would hope that committee could consider that request.
Sure, no problem. I would like to ask Secretary Treasurer, because the agent indicate either June the 19th or July the 10th. So the June the 19th seems a bit tight, so how about July the 10th?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would also agree that June 19th is a little bit tight for circulation. However, we should be able to accommodate the June 10th hearing.
Okay, so committee members?
Sorry, July 10th.
So the July the 10th is. We have a motion to defer. seconded by Ms. Doppler. All in favor? Yes, so this application is deferred.
Thank you.
Any other deferral request by any other applicant, homeowner, or their agent? Seeing none. Okay, so we are done with the deferral request. For those unfamiliar with the Committee of Adjustment procedure and process, I would like to give a brief explanation and scope. Following some procedural matter that we have already undergone, the Secretary-Treasurer will call the application by announcing the application number, the name of the applicant, and address of the property subject to the application. The applicant or authorized agent representing the applicant will then come to the podium, state their name and address for the record, and then present the application. In the case of an agent, the name and firm will usually suffice. I request that you reserve your question or comments pertaining to the staff report until after planning staff has had an opportunity to represent. If there is anyone in the attendance who wishes to speak to a particular application, you will be given the opportunity to do so when the application is presented. Any decision made here today may be appealed to the local planning appeal tribunal, LPAT. Previously, the appeal process was dealt with through the Ontario Municipal Board. However, the province has introduced new legislation in the form of Bill 139, which came into force on April 3rd, 2018. Appeals received in clerk's office associated with minor variance and consent application will be processed and forwarded to LPAT, as they are previously processed and sent to the OMB. The process may be commenced with the Secretary-Treasurer by filing a completed appeal form and filing fee within the prescribed 20 days appeal period. Information pertaining to the appeal process may be obtained by contacting the Secretary-Treasurer at the clerk's office. Now we move on to the new consent application.
Calling application B18010, First Gulf Business Parking. The property is located at 20 Biscayne Crescent.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of staff, and city. My name is Nicole Guadagnoli, and I am representing First Gulf Business Parking. That's for application B18010. The consent application before you seeks approval to permit a lease in excess of 21 years. The lease will be between First Gulf Business Park, Inc. and Cineplex Entertainment. Currently, there is a Cineplex theater that occupies the subject property, and they are looking to retrofit their building to accommodate a Palladium facility, which will require a new lease. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience wishes to speak on this application? Seeing none. Committee members, any question to the agent? Seeing none. Staff, could you please weigh in your comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff find that application B18-010 is supportable subject to the following conditions being imposed. Number one, that arrangements satisfactory to the Region of Peel Public Works Department shall be made with respect to the long-term lease agreement. This condition was requested by the Region of Peel to be included just to verify some of the servicing arrangements that will be part of that lease.
Okay, so with that, any other question? So looking for a motion to proceed.
Agree with the conditions.
Yes, we are.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Ms. Doppler. All in favor? Yes, this is
Thank you.
approved. Thank you.
Calling application A18052-254-6854 Ontario Inc. Property is located at 15 Melanie Drive.
Good morning, Mr. Chair,
Good morning.
members of the committee, planning staff, and members of the public. My name is Ryan Alves. I'm an associate lawyer at the law firm of Prowse, Dash & Crouch, and I'm here today acting as agent for the property owner of 15 Melanie Drive. We submitted this minor variance application seeking a reduction in the number of parking spaces required at the property. To give you a little bit of a background about the property, it's located in the business corridor in the official plan, and it is zoned industrial in the Steeles Industrial Secondary Plan. The designation at the property is M2 Industrial, and as such, it's approved for warehousing, motor vehicle uses, and so on. The property contains one large single-story building containing an approximate area of 1,862 square meters. The structure itself is further subdivided into 3 separate units. The ultimate intent of the property owner is to have 2 of the units used as storage and warehousing, while the 3rd section will be used for storage and warehousing as well as a motor vehicle repair facility. We submitted our minor variance application, and shortly thereafter, during our communications with planning staff, they raised some concerns about the grading towards the southwest driveway of the property. So in support of our minor variance application, we did submit a site plan application that basically spoke to and addressed the grading concerns. As far as we're concerned, the minor variance that this sought is consistent with the purpose and intent of the official plan and would not impose any undue hardship on any neighboring properties. As far as I'm aware, the staff report has been positive, and having reviewed that with my clients, they take no issue with respect to any of the conditions that have been suggested by planning staff. The only other item that I did wish to discuss, just because it wasn't addressed in the staff report, was just in addition to the reduction in the minor variance regarding parking, we were also just seeking an order that the reduction be granted indefinitely, just to prevent my client from having to bring another application in another year or so in order to seek the same relief. But subject to that and any comments that the planning staff have, those are my submission.
Sure, staff will address your comments at the later stage. So I would like to ask my fellow committee member, is there any questions so far on this application?
Just one question, it's probably more for staff, but the agent just mentioned a site plan application has been made, and I note that in the city comments that requirement is not within the suggestions for approval. So was this application just made recently?
It was made, I believe it was something that was submitted about a week or 2 ago prior to the hearing of this matter. And again, it was something that we were working in consultation with the planning staff with, so I don't think it was necessarily a contentious matter. But that being said, I think the subject matter of the grading issue that was addressed in the site plan application was raised in the city's comments at paragraph 3, where it just speaks to my client having to obtain a road occupancy permit in order to complete that work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience wishes to speak on this application? Seeing none, we have 2 letters received for the support. Mr. Paul Neff, property owner 9 Melanie Drive, and number 6 Melanie Drive. So for the record, we're putting these 2 supporting letters for the record. Staff, could you please weigh in your comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff find that application A17-145 is supportable subject to the following conditions being imposed. Number 1, that the variance only be approved to the extent indicated in the sketch attached to the public notice. 2, that the requirement for parking for any combination of uses permitted in the industrial to M2 zone can be calculated at the applicable parking rate in accordance with the zoning bylaw and shall not exceed 41 parking spaces. that the applicant obtain a road occupancy permit prior to conducting any works within the municipal right-of-way and submit a grading plan for review by the Public Works and Engineering Department as part of the permit application. That the applicant repaint the parking spaces on the site as per the sketch attached to the public notice and demonstrate the completion of the works to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works and Engineering. And that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee will render the approved variances null and void.
Thank you. Any question? Rita?
No, Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, my client takes no issues with any of the comments or conditions that have been imposed by the city. One thing I will note, just for the record, is that when my client purchased the property in January 2017, there was no parking spots or parking spaces painted on the property. So as it stands, there aren't currently any parking, designated parking areas. So obviously, once we get through this process, we'll be sure to fulfill that obligation.
Okay. Having said that,
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a quick question to the city then, just a clarification. The applicant mentioned a site plan application has been made, but a request is in place for a grading plan. Could we just have a clarification whether it's a site plan or just a grading plan?
So the site plan was a limited review stream, so it was, the applicant kind of provided that concept plan and a bit of the grading information of how it will be dealt with. But through the road occupancy permit, our engineering services has asked to review the grading plan as part of that process as well, just to kind of have a double sweep of it.
Okay, so just to clarify, what has been submitted is going to satisfy the requirements?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
okay, so looking for a motion?
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve by Ms. Staffler. I'll second this motion. All in favor? Motion carried. This application is approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Calling application A18072, Rishi and Nia Pularu. The property is located at 69 Dorset Drive.
Morning. My name is Nicholas Dell. I'm the authorized agent for this application. I may have to approach the podium to show some photos. I hope staff doesn't mind. If you just move your chairs in a little bit, I'm just kidding. I'm here today representing a second unit for a growing family. And believe it or not, well, I'm sure you can believe it, it is cheaper to expand and create an additional second unit in your home than it is for a young family to move out and find their own home in Brampton. And that's what the application here today represents. I'm happy to say that through the site plan review process, we have captured accurate variances before you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have based on the staff comments. I will note that staff are in support, as you will hear, with the exception of the driveway width. The second unit that we're trying to prove today requires a additional parking space, and it is, I'm behooved to tell you that our client is very insistent that we get that additional width so that they can park and remove themselves without hassle. I'd like to present to you on that note a photo just to get a grasp of the neighboring street character with respect to driveway widths. Across the street, and you'll note that this is a, if I could get some zooming in here, I'm sorry. This is a corner lot. This is the address off Dombey. As you can see, this is the subject property. This is the current layout. This fence and area will be where the extension will be extended into. And across the street, you've got a driveway that has just a configuration that's slightly different. As it peters out here to the left, you can see that there would be a similar width that we're asking for without it being flush with the entire length of the driveway, but that configuration of shape has a width that we would be amenable to if staff would be able to support the length that we're asking, but in a configuration that's consistent with the character of the neighborhood across the street. And it's my submission that this would be in keeping and desirable, given that not only is it a growing family, but also that the neighborhood enjoys similar driveway configurations that allow for additional parking that we need today. Thank you, that's my submission.
Sure. We will get some more information when staff's turns comes for their remarks. Committee members, any questions so far to the applicant? Seeing none. Anyone in the audience wishes to speak on this application? Seeing none. Staff, could you please weigh in your comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff recommend that application A18-072 is supportable in part, subject to the following conditions being imposed. Number one, that variance 1 be approved in part, and that the overall width of the residential driveway, including all hard and level surfaces, shall not exceed 7 meters or 22 feet, or 22.9 feet, sorry. Number 2, that variances 2, 3, and 4 be approved only to the extent shown in the sketch attached to the public notice. Number 3, that the owner finalize site plan approval under city file SP 17-080.000 to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services, and that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Chair, as you note, the staff comments they're looking for 7 meters only, 22.9 feet. We are proposing a driveway that is 25.9, so we're looking for 3 additional feet. And if staff are amenable and the committee would,
Sorry, 25.75.
we are looking for 25.9, and staff are recommending 22.9 feet.
Okay.
So that additional 3 feet would go a long way for ease and convenience of the second unit and the growing family that are going there. And we'd be happy to amend to allow a configuration that's consistent with the neighborhood and not necessarily a flush paved parking area as it is presented in the plan.
Okay, staff, would you want to comment on gentleman's request regarding the neighboring property and his new request?
Excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair, just a comment on what would be required to facilitate the creation of a second unit. They do require 3 full-size parking spaces measuring a minimum width of 2.6 meters. So if the driveway width is approved as recommended by planning staff, this property will not qualify as a second unit. They would not be able to legally create one because it doesn't accommodate that 3rd parking space on site. The 2.8 meters that's been proposed, I can only presume, has been proposed to accommodate all 3 parking spaces on the flankage lot line, recognizing that it is wider than the 6.71 meters that would normally be permitted by just over a meter.
Okay.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we can't get a second unit in here without that driveway, being the 3 feet that we're requesting, whereas staff are requesting reduction of the 3 feet.
Okay, Mr. Crouch?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, so. Basically, this is a very supporting opinion and report by staff, and then the comment to reduce the width of the hard and level surfaces is inconsistent with the rest of the approval. How are we to accommodate that?
If I may, through you, with the second unit hasn't been proposed in the site plan, so this would be the first staff would be hearing of it.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr.
Please
Chair.
go ahead.
If I could just ask, what is the current width of the driveway? So I have a photo in front of me. There's a paved surface, there's a concrete border on each side, and it looks like existing curb cuts remain. So I guess first off is, what is the existing width between the curb cuts?
Mr. Chair, this is the existing driveway, and you can see that there's a little bit of additional area that's not been cut from the curb. I don't have the dimension for the existing driveway, but I can say that what we're proposing is 3 feet more than what staff are recommending. And that's a recommendation that comes on the tails of not understanding that we are looking for a second unit.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
My photo is slightly different than yours.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, I was just there on the weekend, so I'm assuming mine is a bit more current. But there is a concrete border on each side, which looks to be just over a foot or a foot and a half wide.
A walkway, you mean? I see.
For city purposes, it's
A
actually
soldier
part of the
walkway,
driveway, but.
of course. Yeah, okay.
So without knowing what the current width is, I don't know if the city would know.
If I may,
Please.
it's approximately 5.5 meters wide. So just about 17 feet wide.
So So from curb cut to curb cut?
That's not, no, that's the complete, including the concrete border on both sides, it's about 5.5 meters wide. The curb cut is slightly less than that.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant. Your application indicates single-family dwelling. Now you're saying two-family dwelling. So the circulation to the neighbors has been at least inaccurate. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the member's point, that is the case. On receipt of staff comments last week, I went back to the architectural team who had been processing the site plan application. It was only until they had achieved accuracy of variances that was I given carriage of the file. And it was from their understanding to me that the client was looking for a second unit, and that had not been advised to staff yet, nor to myself when I made the application. So I am learning about this in tandem with receiving staff comments recommending a reduction. If you'd like, I could recommend that we could amend the variance through a deferral to allow for the neighbors to have adequate promulgation of the variances as it would respect the second unit. And that would maybe give you the comfort you need to make a decision.
And it might well change the staff report.
It may well.
But certainly the neighbors are entitled to know what's happening to the property if you're creating a new family dwelling.
Sure.
Staff, could you comment on a deferral?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that given that the two-unit information that's kind of presented itself now has come up, I think a deferral would be appropriate to kind of discuss a little bit further and evaluate the application based on that context.
Okay.
Through you,
So-
Mr. Chair, if I may, just the clients were on vacation when we received the staff comments, so they have not really been able to apply on with the neighbors. With the deferral, we can make sure that the neighbors are well aware and get some support from them for a second unit.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, we've heard the earliest time available is July 10th. Do you think that's an adequate time for you to do this? And we'll have a busy meeting on July the 10th?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I believe July the 10th would be great. Thank you. Is that, if that's what Secretary Treasurer is able to accommodate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, is staff able to accommodate July 10th?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we would be able to do that.
Okay, I would just like to reconfirm with the Secretary Treasurer if for this particular application, July 10th, if we move to defer.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. I am away on the 10th of July, but I am returning if we're sitting on the 17th. 17th of July, I'm not here. I'm not here on the 10th of July, excuse me.
Okay.
So the next meeting after that is 3 weeks later.
Oh, it's 3 weeks, okay.
Sure, before that, I would like to check with the staff if there's any order against the property, any compliance, or we are,
No, this is completely proposed construction. Nothing has taken place at this time.
okay. So I would like to ask Ms. Stoffler, before the committee members can make their decision, the next meeting after the July the 10th, what we are looking at?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the scheduled hearing following July 10th is July 31st, with a filing deadline for new information set for July 5th.
That is agreeable.
So you are in the country on that time?
I hope
assume?
so, I hope so.
Okay, so committee
Motion
members?
to defer to July 31st.
Do we have a second? So we have motion by Mr. Crouch and seconded by Ms. Stoffler. All in favor? Yes, we are in favor. So this is deferred to July 31st.
Thank you very much.
Calling application A18073, Satnam and Harpreet Karan. Property is located at 9092 Creditview Road.
Good morning, Chairman, council members, and staff. My name is Peter Vazikas of Empire Design Company, here to represent the owners of 9092 Creditview Road. I'm sure you've had a chance to review the justification report, the site plan. You've seen the photos and the arborist report provided to you.
Yep.
With respect to all that, we feel that the variance for reduction in side yard setbacks is minor in nature. With respect to the arborist report and the issue with the trees, we have identified and verified which trees need to be removed from the revised site plan recently prepared. Now, I have a copy of that here, which is probably not the same as what you have there. I'd like to hand this out to staff so they can review this. It is highlighted in color. Thank you. This was recently done just a couple days ago with respect to the arborist report, because he has indicated 21 trees to be removed, which is not going to be the case. We've identified for only 6 trees to be removed to make room for the proposed dwelling and stockpiling of materials during the construction, whereas one of those trees is only a stump. It was cut down quite some time ago. So basically, we're going to be removing 5 trees, and we're going to be introducing about 50-60% tree replacement with the 3 new sugar maples that we're adding to the front yard. In regards to the row of trees on the side yard, it was previously indicated by the surveyor that those cedars will be removed and cut down. That's not the case. I do have an aerial photo, a photo of the trees on the side yard. The owner would like to retain all those trees in the side yard. You may have this as well, if I can submit that. He also would like his privacy from the neighbors and between themselves. So all those trees are going to remain. And there's about 18 of them there. I've also indicated for you, for your review, the distance from the proposed rear yard balcony to the neighbor to the west, which is the closest point of contact in visibility to the rear yard balcony. The measurement there equals out to approximately 39 meters, but that's actually measured to the small shed. If I can just submit this aerial photo, you can identify better. There's a small shed adjacent to the house, and the measurement was taken to that portion, whereas the house is actually about 3 or 4 meters away, so it's actually more than 40 meters distance away. Now, to the south, there's no development there as of yet, but if need be, we can always propose a privacy wall on the flanking edge to conceal the visibility of the rear second floor balcony.
Okay.
Based on all of this information provided to you, proposed variance side yard setbacks, with the issue of the trees and the balcony, we feel that this is all minor in nature, and request for the committee to find this acceptable in order to proceed.
Okay. Committee members, any question, concern?
Well, I share staff's concerns with respect to tree removal, so I would like to hear from staff with respect to that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we'll come on to that. Is there anyone in the audience wishes to speak this application? Please come forward at the podium. And your name and address for the record.
My name is Yahu Wang. I'm the neighbor of this application. And,
could you please say your address?
Okay, 71, that's the lot 105. Address is 71 Fallowfield Road.
71?
Fallowfield Road.
Okay, please go ahead.
We're concerned about the property too close to the fence. It's only 3 meters. By law, it says it's 7.5 meters. So we concerned when we face at the backyard to his wall, so the view is not good for us.
Okay, any other concern beside this?
I think that's the only concern.
Okay, so staff will answer your question following.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Bin, also the co-owner of the house, which the address is 71 Fallowfield Road. And, our backyard.
Sorry, your full name, please.
From the Bin Wang.
Can you please spell?
Okay, so my concern is our backyard is facing this proposed side wall, side elevation. And
right now, the bylaw requires a minimum 7.5-meter setback for the proposed new building, and he requires 3 meter, which is really my main concern, because on my backside, I have like a breakfast, great room, den, and a master bedroom, and a main bedroom. And just look out of any of these rooms, I will see just a side wall, side elevation of a proposed new house, which is 2-storied, and also it's only 3-meter setback from the borderline. And this is this is my main concern. This is the view. I wouldn't get any view from my window. And then second is the privacy.
Okay.
And
sure.
I don't think it's a good idea to cover my all windows on the side elevation all day long, because the new house is getting so close. And also if you notice, it's a new, like a 2-storied building, and it's on the south of the my backyard, and it might block some sunlight or sunshine from my backyard. So.
Sure, we do understand your concern, but
Yeah.
perhaps maybe you can listen to the staff. After, if you wishes to speak, you can come
Yeah,
further
sure.
again. Okay?
Sure, thank you.
Anybody else from the audience regarding this property? Please.
Yes, I'm living the 73 Fallowfield Road.
73 Fallowfield?
Yes,
What's your name, please?
Shankar Idley,
Can you please spell your name?
Shanker.
Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
I have problem with the in the backyard there is so close for that fence, and too much they can cut so much tree for that. That's also problem. But that is they cut the beauty for that. So all then is we are a problem with the we have privacy is after that is gone. They make the new home, right? So we don't want anything closer by him, that we need a privacy for this thing, right, also.
Okay, sure. The committee members and the staff is listening your comments. Maybe you can come back after listening to the staff report. Okay?
So also, so many things for that, I don't know what should I say for this. So this fence is so close for this, over that. So we have to 7.5 meter, right, should be in there. And no cutting the tree, allowed to cut the tree. This all the beauty of my house is destroyed, right? So we are in the corner home, so we need a beauty for this, right?
Okay, we do understand your concern. Thank you. Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Troy Burge, and I reside at lot 103. Last night, my wife and I put together a letter that
We have your
sent.
letter.
You have the
I was
letter?
about to say, I was about to mention about your letter. We do
Yeah, so
understand.
just specifically, we wanted to focus on the agreement of purchase and sale. When we bought that home, it was because of the beauty of the neighborhood and the trees. And I believe that the builder agreed to, the builders in that area agreed to leave the trees on Credit View Road. That was one of the commitments they made when they decided to work the area and build homes in that area. That's all I wanted to say. That's on our agreement of purchase and sale. I put it there in the letter. Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience wishes to speak on this application? Please come forward.
Sorry.
No problem.
Hi, my name is Lena Sohal, and I'm at 69 Fallowfield Road. So I have the same concerns about the trees, because when we purchased this house, the reason we purchased was the privacy. And if all the trees are taken down, then we won't have any privacy in there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else in the audience? Go ahead, please.
Chairman, council members, we have indicated originally that all those trees on the side yard will remain. They stand about 45 meters tall, which blocks a lot of the visibility of the home, except for the roof portion. Now, all those homes to the north are also 2-story homes. So by retaining all those trees, they still maintain their privacy. And for those people who indicated that they are the corner lot, our house, proposed house, is set back, I think, about 25 meters from the front yard. But every one of those trees on the side are gonna stay. They're not coming down at all. We're only gonna make room for about, like I said, 4 to 5 to 6 trees in order for the building footprint, and all the rest are gonna remain.
Okay. Committee members, any comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to the applicant, what is the dimension from the side of the current house to the fence?
It should be on the site plan there. I believe it's about 6 meters, or just under 6 meters from the existing house.
So you're going to reduce that space in half?
The house is a wider proportion to fulfill the size of the lot, whereas the existing house is a single bungalow. On the other side, on the south side, it's a lot greater distance, but on the north side, it is approximately 6 meters, I believe.
Thank you.
Which is already, does not comply with the existing current zoning bylaw.
Mr. Chair, what's the square footage of the house?
Right now, I think it stands at about 4,000. I'm not exactly confirming that. It is a 2-story home. There is quite a bit of open to below areas.
Thank you.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if it's a question to both the applicant and the staff, but the applicant is indicating that the hedges are to remain the way that they're currently shown. They encroach on the side of the house.
Those hedges are actually indicated as cedar hedges, but they're actual cedar trees, like full-grown trees, and they do stand about 4 to 5 meters tall currently.
So, sorry, my limited understanding is that there's a drip edge.
Yes.
So the drip edge is usually considered when looking at a building, and there has to be at least, the building cannot encroach within the drip edge, is my limited understanding, but I would ask
You are correct.
staff.
Yes, and we're going to maintain that drip edge as well, which is about the 3-meter distance from the center of the trunk.
So the depiction on the plan then is showing that it encroaches on the house?
It does. It's probably incorrectly drawn by the surveyor. I was actually out there, if you can see the photograph of the trees there. The umbrella of the trees circumference from the center of the trunk is probably about 2 meters, and we're going to retain 3 meters from the center of the trunk, which is an extra meter further. If there are any damages to the roots, it'll be minimal and will not destroy the trees at all. They will all remain to maintain the privacy of the neighbors.
Okay,
And
sure.
for the owner.
So, I think we should go to see staff's report, so that will clear lots of questions to the neighbors and committee and applicant. Staff, could you please weigh in your comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, quite a bit of new information has been provided by the applicant today that wasn't necessarily included within the first review of this application. So on the original version of the sketch, those cedar trees were identified as to be removed, which I would imagine is part of the concerns being raised by residents in regard to privacy. Given this new information that's being provided, staff would recommend a deferral in this case for some additional time to review this new information that's being provided and kind of review the variance within this different context.
Okay.
If I may, please keep in mind that I was given only hours' notice to prepare an arborist report, and my arborist actually pulled off a miracle to get it done in 1 day. His information is probably incorrect, stating that there'll be 21 trees to be removed at that point, but we had to get something developed for the next morning for circulation. And he accommodated that time frame for us. If it needs to be revised for staff to review, that's fine, we can do that.
Okay. Mr. Crouch, you were saying something?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. In the event that the applicant agrees to maintain trees, is there a provision for, is there a possible provision for security to ensure those trees remain in place and are replaced if they die? I understand, for example, developers provide 3-year warranties.
Through the chair, we have to take the information back to confirm with our staff whether that's a possible condition that can be applied through the minor variance. So I can't say right now. I think the question would be, whether the variances currently constructed are sufficient to ensure the longevity of those trees if the security can't be maintained. So we want to go back and look at this issue very specifically and come forward with something that is sustainable.
Thank you.
Mr. Stoffler, please go ahead.
One last comment. One neighbor made a comment that in their agreement of purchase and sale, there was a notice by the builder that there would be no change. I don't know what the wording is. I don't want to misspeak what was represented. But are you aware, is the agent aware of any such agreement by a builder and how it would be binding upon this
I'm not
property?
aware of anything, but I'm sure that if the builder made an agreement with the purchasers on his land, it's specifically for his land. That's how I determine it.
You can, if you wishes to speak further, you can come at the podium.
If you have a copy of that.
It's actually in Section 19, Schedule D. It specifically says that purchasers are advised that Credit View Road is to be maintained as a rural heritage feature that will include the existing narrow paved roadway, low-maintenance ditches, large shade trees, minimal street lighting, and new unlit asphalt pathway, and so on. That's what it says.
Thank you.
Which is exactly what we're trying to maintain. We have to make room for the
Please,
proposed
no
house.
communication. You all have given the opportunity to speak at the podium, so any communication, it has to be with the committee. Please go ahead.
Also my,
Yes,
yeah, also my
sorry.
concern, yeah. So as the map on this page, you can see mainly between the proposed new house and the existing house, there are only like cedar hedge, cedar trees. They are only like 4 or 5 meter high, yeah, tall. So from the second floor, those cedar trees wouldn't block any views. But just imagine, even they stay, and the new house built like it's 2-story and 24 meter long, and so can they protect our privacy and still like we exposed to like a 24 meter long side wall of the new building, new house? Yeah, but we don't want to look outside like just only a wall, a side wall.
I
brick
would
side
like
wall.
to remind the neighbor, anything you wish to speak, please speak to the committee, not to the,
Okay,
yeah,
thank you, thank
No
you.
problem.
Thank you for reminding me this. You know, it's my first
no problem.
time like being
problem.
here.
You're doing
So,
well.
yeah. So as the community, you can see on this map, there's only like mainly it's only like cedar trees between the existing and the proposed new building. There's only one big tree somewhere in between the two hedges, and these cedar trees are only 4 or 5 meter tall. And as I said, from now on the second floor, in the window, I can see the like trees, beautiful. I can see the sky. Just imagine when the new building built up, and we will see a wall, a brand new wall. I mean, 2-story, 24 meter long side wall, which is only 3 meter setback from our border, the property line. So.
Okay, thank you. As you may have heard, the staff indicated that they will be looking into all this new information came forward. So maybe jointly at the committee level, we'll make some decision, and you will be aware, and you will be notified for
Yeah,
any further step or any advancement into this application. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Please keep in mind that the distance of 3 meters as opposed to 7.5 meters, it's still going to stand as a 2-story home. He's still going to have the visibility of the wall regardless as a 2-story home based on the zoning bylaws provided at a midpoint height peak of 10.6 meters. Regardless whether it's 3 meters, 7.5 meters, or even 10 meters, he's still going to see the house wall. And the trees are going to remain, every single one. And we'll hoard them as well and protect them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other question by the committee member, or as staff indicated that since the new information emerged, staff, would you want to say something? If I missed your gesture? Okay, I thought you want to say something. So, committee members, how would you like to deal with this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would support staff in deferring this application. I think there might need to be a recirculation based on the new information, but I leave that to staff and the secretary treasurer
Sure.
so that we can make a decision when to bring this back.
Staff, what do you think the adequate time for the all new information? So there's no tight time limit for the circulation or to obtain any new information.
Through the chair, I'm not sure that a new circulation is required for this. The applicant correctly points out that there are some rights of redevelopment on the property that stand today. So what staff would be doing is reviewing the additional arborist information and confirming whether or not that information indicates that with the proposed setback on that side of the house, those trees can be retained or sustainable. In the event that the variance needs to be changed to provide additional room, then I assume a circulation is required. So I think you're probably correct, committee member, that it should go to maybe July, the later meeting in July.
So we have two meetings in July. One is on July the 10th, and the second one is on July the 31st. So, yes, please go
I
ahead.
would prefer the 10th.
After the
I
10th?
won't be available on the 31st.
Okay. So let me just reconfirm with the staff, so committee can make a decision. I assume Secretary Treasurer is fine with July the 10th?
Through you, Mr. Chair, provided the agent is aware that any new information is required no later than June 12th.
June which?
June 12th.
12th.
It's our filing deadline for applications that will be listed for the July 10th hearing.
You understand, sir? Okay, so
Second.
staff?
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff are agreeable to the deferral to July 10.
Okay, committee members?
Defer the application to the July 10th meeting.
Motion to defer for July 10th by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Ms. Stoffer. All in favor? This application is deferred to July the 10th. To all the neighbors who are present here, so there will be another hearing for this very same application on July the 10th. And I assume you guys can get in touch with Secretary Treasurer at the clerk's office if there is any other information anyone wishes to see after the committee.
Through you, Mr. Chair, for the benefit of the speakers, deferred public notices will be mailed, notifying the property owners as well as those who spoke today of the hearing that will be scheduled for July 10th. So they automatically will be notified.
Okay. So is that clear for everything? All the neighbors? Okay, thank you. Good.
One more thing.
Please.
So we want to allow to only this now is a single family home, we're gonna allow only single family, not two-story.
Sir,
This our privacy gonna lose for that, right? Now is a single town or single family bungalow home.
so you mean no two-story, the
No.
single story, right?
No, yeah.
Well, that's what the new information will be coming on the July the 10th.
Yeah.
But,
What time?
Sorry?
What's the time for the hearing?
Same time.
9 o'clock. Right?
Yes, and you will be notified through the mail, and so you can come and put forward all your concerns.
All right.
Okay?
Thank
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify.
Uh-huh.
I know that staff said that by rights, this can be a two-story home.
That's correct, through you, Mr. Chair. The zoning bylaw currently permits a maximum building height of 10.6 meters, which can easily accommodate a full two-story home. There is no variance required for the building height. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, staff. I guess at the later stage on July the 10th, we will discuss in detail or any question any neighbors may have. Thank you.
Calling application A18074, Peaches Barnaby. The property is located at 259 Queen Mary Drive.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, staff, I guess council members.
Good morning.
My name is Peaches Barnaby, and representing myself here today, the owner of 259 Queen Mary Drive. I've lived there for 14 years. I'm the sole owner. I have 4 young kids, 2 age 14 years old, a 12-year-old, and a 10-year-old. We're a family of 6. And seeking a minor variance for an existing below-grade entrance for my property. It's a minor variance in that it's currently I'm seeking 0.76 meters, and I guess the bylaw has it at 0.76, and the bylaw has it as 0.6 meters. I've spoken to both my neighbors. They do not have a problem with me having that side entrance, and it's not impacting the official plan in any way. It's conformed to the intended zoning, and it has no impact whatsoever. So basically, that is my submission today, and I'm hoping that I will be granted the permit.
Thank you. Committee members, would you like to, any questions so far?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the staff report indicates that the side entrance not be used to accommodate a second family dwelling. Yet when I see your sketch, there's an apparent refrigerator and wet bar.
When I completed my basement, which I got a permit from the city, right? Officially I wanted to do a second unit, but because I wasn't able to afford to do a second unit, I decided, okay, I'll just do it for my own purpose. So my drawing, everything was approved by the city for a bar, for a wet bar, which I have in my basement.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody in the audience wishes to speak on this particular application? Seeing none. Staff, could you please weigh in with your comments or recommendations?
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff recommend that application A18-04074 is supportable, subject to the following conditions being imposed. Number 1, that the extent of the variances be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. Number 2, that the below-grade entrance shall not be used to access an unregistered second unit. Number 3, that a building permit be obtained for the below-grade entrance within 60 days of the committee's final decision. And number 4, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Okay, so any other question? Seeing none. To the homeowner, do you understand and agrees with these recommendations and the conditions by the staff?
Yes, I do understand.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion.
Motion to approve with conditions.
Motion to approve by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Ms. Stoffler. All in favor? This is approved.
Thank you.
Calling application A18075, Rice Development Corporation, Inc., Fiacell Properties Limited, and 2414520 Ontario Limited. Property is located at 190 Bovair Drive West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Roger Howard. I'm here on behalf of Rice Development, the applicant of this application. As outlined in the staff report, Mr. Chairman, this application requests permission for the temporary parking of vehicles not associated with an on-site business. The area proposed for the parking is largely on a grassed, unused area in the center of the site, adjacent to a fairly large area of existing parking. The parking area would be fully screened from view from Bovair Drive by an existing building fronting Bovair.
and would be buffered from Ironside Drive by some landscaping in the interim, and ultimately by a proposed building that would front onto Ironside as well. As noted in the staff report, the proposal would have minimal, if any, impact on the existing function of the site and on the surrounding lands. And in those regards, Mr. Chairman, we're in concurrence with the findings of the staff report. The one item we would like to address, however, is in regard to condition 1 and the temporary period attached to any approval provided today. We've asked for a 5-year approval period for the following reasons. Firstly, as noted by staff, the parking use is not contentious or impactful in any way. Parking is an existing use permitted on site, and it's not a request for an unusual or noxious type of use. Secondly, as the staff report notes, there is an existing rezoning application on the property right now that we're hoping will be approved in the next year or so to allow an expanded list of uses on site, one being outdoor storage in the industrial part of the site, outdoor storage for on-site businesses. So there is some contemplation for outdoor storage in the future for a good portion of the site. Thirdly, Mr. Chairman, and this is really the crux of the argument, I guess, is that the variance, if approved, has costs associated with it in developing the site to permit the parking, to put it into effect. There'll be a surface treatment required to remove the grass. There's fencing, landscaping, lighting. All those costs have to be amortized and recouped over a period of time, and 2 years is a fairly limited time to do that. And fourthly and finally, Mr. Chairman, and we understand the reason for requesting site plan approval in the staff report, but those are additional costs, again, that have to be recouped somehow in the length of the lease. So, Mr. Chairman, we believe that the planning considerations will be properly dealt with through the site plan process, but the business side of this approval is related to the timing and the timing of the approval of the length of time. So we respectfully request, Mr. Chairman and committee, that our request for a 5-year approval be upheld, and we appreciate the time to present today.
So thank you for your submissions. We will later stage after discussing with the staff, so once they will outline their recommendations, then perhaps we can discuss on the time limit. So, committee members, any questions so far to the applicant? Seeing none? Seeing none, anyone in the audience wishes to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, could you please weigh in your comments?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, staff have reviewed the application against the 4 tests outlined in the Planning Act and are recommending approval subject to 7 conditions. Condition number 1, that the variance be approved for a temporary period of 2 years. Condition 2, that a site plan application shall be submitted within 60 days of the committee's decision, and the site plan shall be approved and implemented within 120 days of the committee's final decision, or at an extended period of time at the discretion of the Director of Development Services. The site plan application will further evaluate impacts related to grading, drainage, stormwater management, and opportunities to mitigate any visual impacts through the provision of additional landscaping. Condition 3, that the applicant shall submit a grading and servicing plan and stormwater management report prepared by a certified professional engineer and approved to the satisfaction of the Director of Environment and Development Engineering, section of the Public Works and Engineering Department. Condition 4, that the applicant shall submit a landscape plan prepared by a landscape architect, proposing landscape improvements along Ironside Drive street frontage to the satisfaction of the Manager of Parks Planning and Development section of the Public Works and Engineering Department. 5, that the storage be restricted to cars only and that no works or repairs be undertaken on any vehicle at any time. And 6, that the extent of the variances be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. And lastly, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee will render the approval null and void.
Thank you. So, as to the staff, my question to the staff, as the applicant already indicated that the two-year period is, the temporary period is less. Is there anything specific staff wishes to speak on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff would prefer to have an opportunity to evaluate the proposal again after 2 years to see whether or not it is consistent with the outcome of the review of the concurrent development applications that have been filed for the property. So we're requesting 2 years rather than the 5. requested by the applicant.
Mr. Crouch?
Through you, Mr. Chair, but you'd recognize that a 5-year period, if development slows down, is commercially necessary for just preparing, at the cost of just preparing the reports and agreements that you're requiring. Aside from the 5-year lease.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct, and there is an opportunity for the applicant to then again apply to the committee to reevaluate the application 2 years from now to determine its appropriateness and whether or not it is consistent and in keeping with the development application that's been submitted for the property.
Okay.
It suggests to me that the applicant would hamper his own redevelopment of the property. I don't think that's the applicant's intention. Thank you.
Stauffer?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant, obviously you're looking for 5 years and the city is looking for 2 years. Is there any movement that you could provide on your part?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Anything more than 2 years obviously would be helpful. Optimally, we would like it to have no time limit, knowing then that we could go ahead and develop the site for this use, knowing that a lease could potentially be in place for more than 5 years. And we understand we can come back to the committee at the end of any approval that's provided today and reapply. So we would still prefer, obviously, longer than less, and would prefer the 5 years if we could get it.
So I would have, through you, Mr. Chair, the same question to the city staff, if there's any ability to make an adjustment to the time frame, because it seems that both parties are in agreement as to what will transpire. It's just the time given to the development.
So through the chair, one of the key aspects of this application that staff took into consideration in arriving in a position of support for 2 years was the fact that there's an open zoning bylaw amendment application to consider, OP zoning bylaw amendment application to consider the suitability of that use. It's occurring, the review of that's occurring right now. Our sense is that exercise will be complete within 2 years and either establish the use on the property, in which case there's a basis for continuing, I guess, into the future, or alternately that exercise concludes that outdoor storage is inappropriate on this property, in which case that will dovetail with the minor variance. So the 2 years and staff's consideration of support for this position was tied explicitly to the open applications and the expectation that exercise be finalized in 2 years. We were trying to be helpful in the interim to support this tentative or temporary use.
So through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify then, if in 2 years' time the exercise is completed and it's deemed that the zoning is not appropriate for this, then the applicant would have invested time and funding for a 2-year process and may come before committee again and not be approved. I ask the question because there are many applications that come before us that were of a temporary nature and they come to be reestablished as a temporary nature. So I appreciate that and I guess this is, sorry, I'm diving into a second question, but there is a zoning application in place. So I'm just looking to offset some costs and some risks on the applicant's part versus the desires of the city.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add one thing. I understand through the rezoning that although outdoor storage is being considered, and I would suggest supported so far in our discussions with staff, it would be outdoor storage for businesses on the site and not to permit outdoor storage for off-site businesses, so which is what we're asking for today through the variance. So even though the zoning is hopefully taken care of in the next year or 2 years, and outdoor storage is a permitted use, it wouldn't necessarily permit what we're asking for today. And I stand to be corrected on that, but I'll just raise that for you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would concur. The zoning application doesn't anticipate outside storage that is not associated with a business operating from the site as part of the rezoning application.
And through you, Mr. Chair, if indeed the time limit was extended to 5 years, would that then be a legal non-conforming use after some other approvals not permitting Unattached outdoor storage?
It would be not a legal non-conforming use. It would simply run the course of the variance that was approved. Should that approval expire, then the use will no longer be permitted.
In 2 or 5
In
years?
2 or
as the
5 years,
case might be.
dependent on any time frame imposed.
Thank you. I'm prepared to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Uh,
Oh.
Ms. Stoffler, please go ahead.
Just one more question of the applicant. I believe on the site there are currently trucks that are stored, so would those be removed and replaced, or would that form part of the outdoor storage?
Well, that's an existing use on the site. The tenant is on the site. Those are their trucks. So that would hopefully come into conformity with the new zoning that's approved that would permit the outdoor storage, which would then allow the trucks to remain.
So just to clarify, what you're intending to do is house more trucks?
No, not through you, Mr. Chair, not more trucks, just simply allow what's there
Okay.
to remain, as long as the tenant is in place on site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Crouch, you mentioned about your possible motion?
Well, I'm inclined to move that the application be approved, subject to conditions, but with amendment to condition 1, providing a temporary period of 5 years.
Okay, so we have a motion put forward by Mr. Crouch with the amendment of variance number 1, the temporary period of 5 years. Do we have seconder? Seconded by Ms. Stoffler. So, all in favor? Yes, this motion is carried.
Thank you very much.
Calling application A18076, Islamic Shia Ithna Ashari Jamaat of Toronto. Property is located at 7570 Kennedy Road South.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, staff, and public here today. Thank you for allowing me to make a presentation. My name is Dan Krasuski, and I represent the Islamic Shia Ithna Ashari Jamaat of Toronto. And I'm here with a very simple request to ask for permission to utilize the existing building at 7570 Kennedy Road South for accessory uses to the Mazamin Islamic Center for offices and classrooms only. The subject lands abut the Mazamin Islamic Center, which is 7580 Kennedy Road South, and it's been purchased by the congregation with the intention of expanding the size of the religious center. And now the process is underway. The congregation is going through a needs analysis to determine how they want to develop this property. The exact form that the expanded center will take and how those lands will be utilized is being determined by the congregation and will be subject to a future full rezoning application, zoning bylaw amendment application to the City of Brampton. So that's going to take some time for both things to happen, the congregation to come up with what its needs analysis is, how they want to proceed, and then actually making the application for rezoning. So prior to the full zoning bylaw amendment, the congregation is interested in limited utilization of the existing building for meetings and classroom space. It's very, very simple and very, very focused. I'm sure you were out to the building, you did your inspections, and you saw the existing Mazamin Center. It's a beautiful building, it's well landscaped, and it's maintained right to the highest standards. When I met originally with the executive committee at the Mazamin Islamic Center, we talked about what uses should we try for in terms of the Committee of Adjustment, and I cautioned them that, look, you can't push it too far with a Committee of Adjustment. We can't go for uses. We can't say that we want to do or have religious worship in this building. So we said, okay, what can we actually use in this building that is reasonable to take to the Committee of Adjustment? And that's where we came down with the idea that the accessory uses to the place of worship would be appropriate for this building. And I've got some pictures, you've got some pictures in your package, the letter that I provided to you. I'm going to come around just to talk about the pictures if I could. If you go to page 10, 10 of the report.
So
That is
page 10, you said?
page 10 of my,
Yep.
so that's a little hard to read, but 7570 is this building right here.
Yep.
It's about a 5,000 square foot house. To the south of it is the driveway and parking for about 6 cars. To the north is a large lawn area, and that lawn area accommodates the existing septic system that is on this site. Let me talk a little bit about the actual building itself. This building was built in 1994. It was a purpose-built building for the Children's Aid Society. It has only been a Children's Aid Society for all that time, and has operated as a de facto institutional use for 24 years. And in that building, it has had offices and classrooms as accessory uses right from the beginning. I just wanted to show you the pictures that are also in your my report. And those are just to show you the existing classrooms that are in the building, the existing accessory uses that are part of the group home. And then the other picture on page 5 is the picture of the one of the offices in the building. So again, it's not like we're trying to do something that isn't already on the site. These meeting rooms, the Mazamine Center would like to use them for day counseling and office administration. They're a little bit short on office administration in the existing building. The classrooms will be used on a limited basis for religious teaching and will not be used for Ministry of Education sanctioned purposes. So Sunday school is kind of really what we're talking about, and the classrooms are already there. The lands, I'll go back to the air photo, will not be changed in any meaningful way. We're not adding parking. We've got a septic bed that we have to maintain. We're not going to change the building in any way. We might add a walkway at the back of the site to get from the existing temple to this building, just so we don't have to have people go out to Kennedy Road. But that would be the only change we'd make on this site. So essentially, for the passerby, 7570 Kennedy Road will not change. You've seen my report, and I'm sure you've read it. And I've seen the staff report, and obviously they have recommended refusal, so I think I better take a little bit of time to go through the 4 tests that are here. And if you don't mind, just give me a little bit of leeway. I'm going to kind of put them in a different order. If we could go to number 3, that's on page 3, the desirable and appropriate for the development of the lands. And let's go to the last 2 sentences. The requested variance will not result in any significant physical modifications to the existing building on site. That was my position, and staff has acknowledged that. The requested variance is desirable and for appropriate development of the site. So that's the one you're going to hear a lot of me. You're going to hear me say that a lot as I keep going. Let's go back to number 1. Does it conform to the intent of the official plan? This property is designated residential in the official plan. There's no secondary plan for these lands. Residential designations permits places of worship. Full stop. There's no ambiguity there. Residential designations in the OP permit places of worship. Staff have gone on to add performance standards to the test here that relate to the zoning bylaw. And that's not what we're supposed to do. The OP allows places of worship. It doesn't take us to dealing with the performance standards. But I'll deal with those performance standards anyways. Going back to number 3, staff have said the requested variances will not result in any significant physical modifications. So it's not changing. So in fact, traffic's not going to change, land use compatibility is not going to change, community integration and performance standards are not going to change. It's going to be the same as it is today. So in my respectful opinion, it does meet the test of the intent of the official plan. Sorry, my mouth is getting very dry here. I feel like Donald Trump. He starts to stutter. Let me just get a drink. Thank you for that. So let me go to, does it conform to the intent of the official plan? And I'm going to go back to the pictures. The existing RE2 zone allows a group home. The group home has accessory uses that include offices and classrooms. So we're going to be utilizing the existing accessory uses that are already permitted in the zoning bylaw, offices and classes. So my opinion is it certainly does conform to the intent of the zoning bylaw. We've talked about number 3. It's desirable. And then number 4, again, I go back to the fact that if staff have agreed that it does not result in any significant physical changes, we conform to the intent of the official plan, we conform to the intent of the OP, and it's minor and it's desirable, I would say it certainly is minor. Nothing is changing. So I think that, sort of to sum up here, sorry, there was one thing I missed. I know that the fact that staff have said doesn't conform to the official plan is probably a concern to the committee, so I'm just going to go to the official plan directly, 4.88 of the official plan. It's under places of worship. And I'm just going to read this couple of paragraphs if you indulge me. Increasingly, places of worship are providing social and community-related services that were once the function of the various levels of government or social service agencies. The City of Brampton shall encourage the location of places of worship sites throughout the city in accordance with identified needs as a means of strengthening the spiritual and social fabric of the community. Places of worship sites shall be compatible with and complement existing and abutting uses, be a good fit in residential areas, and designated in areas where they derive mutual benefit from compatible land uses. That's exactly what's happening here. The Mazamine Center has purchased a property that exactly fits the definition that's in the OP. I just wanted to also mention, we did reach out to the neighbors. We reached out to the neighbor that was notified, that is the Brampton Golf Club, and we had a good meeting, and they had no concerns with the application. I don't think they're here today. So I would just sort of want to wrap it up. I know that typically, obviously, when an application is refused, you don't get conditions. And I'm hoping that I have been able to convince you that it meets the 4 tests, and that, again, it is a reasonable request, since all we are asking for was not taking the whole place of worship uses and putting it on this site. We're only taking the accessory uses from the Mazamine Center and putting them into a building that already has those accessory uses. That's what we're doing. So what I did was put together some conditions of approval for the committee, and I'll just...
Sure.
Do you want a copy of them? I've got extra copies here.
Sure.
So the conditions that I've put forward for your benefit are, number 1, that the site, 7570 Kennedy Road South, only be utilized for accessory uses to the place of worship, including parking, faith-based instruction, or teaching and administrative offices, which is what the variance request is. That no additional parking be provided on the site. And it's sort of, I didn't really need to say that because we have a septic system on the site and we can't add parking anyways, but I wanted to, just for your benefit and for comfort. And excuse me, and just recognizing my original comment that this is not going to be here forever. We are going through the process of coming up with a needs analysis. We will be submitting for a rezoning, a full rezoning, and bring this into full conformity. That the approval be granted for a temporary period of 5 years. I think that gives the committee some comfort that we will meet our commitment to get a zoning application in. and that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void. And that concludes my presentation, and I appreciate your time and will answer any questions.
Thank you. Committee members, is there any question to the agent now or after the staff's report?
No questions right now, Mr. Chair.
Okay, anyone in the audience wishes to speak on to this application? Seeing none, staff, could you please weigh in your comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the applicant has provided some background information as to the existing zoning permissions and what's permitted as of right on the property, including a group home, auxiliary group home, single detached dwelling. Staff are of the opinion that this use that's requested is unique in nature and it is not permitted as of right by the applicable zoning, and for that reason staff feel that this is not the appropriate mechanism for granting permissions for uses that are not permitted as of right by the existing zoning bylaw, and as such staff are recommending that the application be refused.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
With respect to conformity to the official plan, the second to last sentence reads, although the requested variance is not in conflict with the policies of residential designation, the official plan, the proposed variance does not conform to the aforementioned policies. So it's not in conflict, but it doesn't confirm. How am I to read that sentence?
There's this, through you, Mr. Chair, there is a specific set of criteria that the official plan has established for permitting places of worship within the residential designations. That being that land use compatibility, traffic impacts, community integration, and performance standards be implemented into the zoning bylaw and be taken into consideration to ensure that the site is able to accommodate the functional demands of a place of worship. So with that being said, although a place of worship is permitted within the residential designation of the official plan, there is a specific set of criteria that the use needs to be able to satisfy in order for it to be permitted as right on the property.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Just a question. The mosque fits into the official plan and it meets the zoning bylaw. So I think the struggle for us is understanding why a building next to it may not. So in terms of what I'm reading, I read that both the applicant and the city agree that it conforms to the official plan, even though there seem to be some criteria to be addressed, which I think we could do. I think the desirability is accepted by both parties. It's my personal belief this is minor in nature. So I stand with the question of the zoning, and I struggle with understanding that the mausoleum meets the 4 tests and is acceptable versus this building, which is not. And I guess part of the question is this application, the building that we're looking at, considered a place of worship, or is it the principal and accessory use of a place of worship?
Through the chair, for my comment. The subject application deals with lands designated residential. I propose the introduction of a new use. The nature of Planning Act review of such an application and the review of the official plan, associated matters underlie our staff's position that this should be dealt with as a zoning bylaw amendment. When you're considering bringing a similar extension of a use on adjacent property on a property like this for the long-term consideration of the appropriate use of the land, you want to consider things like traffic, land use compatibility, the criteria that have been set out. It's staff's position that when encountering these scenarios, that the appropriate tool to evaluate such a proposal is through a zoning bylaw amendment.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of, so I think that clarifies for me. In terms of the building as it was previously used and the agent's comments that they will be using classrooms and having meetings, even though it's in conjunction with the place of worship, would that be in keeping with what was being used previously? Because they obviously have parking, there was obviously a certain amount of traffic. So I'm wondering, perhaps we can't make that exact comparison, but the same situations were occurring. And I guess part of the question then is, are the hours of operation slightly different? Is that maybe something that we're looking at?
Through the chair, I would suggest respectfully to the applicant as well as the committee, that the use that was permitted on the property previously was as a group home. That was its principal use of the property. What's being put forward today is an extension of what would have been kind of accessory uses to that group home, like incidental uses to that group home. And the proposal being put forward that those incidental uses to a group home will now form the primary use of the property. That would have been what was contemplated with the group home approval within the residential zoning. So what you have before you is, it's a different animal. And I would just underscore again that staff's position is the appropriate tool for evaluating this is through a zoning bylaw amendment.
Can I talk about that a little bit? I think that the existing building, as I said, has been a de facto institutional use for 24 years. It has classrooms and it has offices. And the member has a good question, what are the hours of operation and so on. Right now, that site was used 24 hours a day. It had 8 or 9 children and 3 adults that were always in that building. The operation that we're talking about here, like the bedrooms will not be used, so half of the building won't be used. There's only a few offices and a couple of classrooms that will be used here. So the offices, as I indicated, will be used during the day, that's it. And the classrooms will be used on the weekends, maybe once or twice during the week in the evenings. But it's actually less use of the site than was on it previously. And again, I go back to the fact that we're talking about accessory uses that are for both uses, accessory to the group home, accessory to the Mazamin Islamic Center. The actual function of the site will not change, and again, I go back and say, the passerby that goes by this site, once the Mazamin Center is in, if we're successful today, will not notice any difference. And of course, we are going to go through the rezoning process. This isn't the final part of our process. This is the first step on that journey. We're going to get to figuring out exactly what we want to do on this site, and we're going to submit a full rezoning application.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was my next question. Is when will that application be put forward?
Well, I'm thinking that the community is probably going to take half a year to a year to come up with what they want on the site, and then we will make our pre-application immediately, and then work through the process of rezoning. And as you know, rezoning process takes a year and a half to 2 years, and then you've got a year of site plan and building permit. So we're talking 3 years of the process, and then a year for us to kind of get to what we actually want to do on the site.
Thank you.
That's why I thought the 5-year, it gives the committee some comfort that, it puts a little pressure on us, make sure that we're working towards that goal. But it's certainly not, it's something that they want to do right away, and that's what they're in the process of doing. They've already started their meetings to come up with the long-term development of the site.
Okay, I guess Ms. Corzola?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, and I understand that you're considering whether to approve, and I appreciate the conditions of draft approval, or the draft conditions for your consideration. I would note that if you are contemplating approval of this application, the building division has requested that a building permit for a change of use be obtained. As my colleague in planning has mentioned, the building was constructed and has been used for residential purposes, despite the ancillary office and classroom that would have been associated with that residential use. In this case, it would be a change in major occupancy for the building, so a building permit for change of use will be required.
And through Mr. Chair, we're very happy with that condition. We can live with that.
Okay.
We've already contemplated going through that process.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant. Paragraph 2 of the staff report indicates, similarly, an application for a temporary use bylaw may be submitted by the owner to permit the requested uses for a temporary period of no more than 3 years. Why are you in front of the committee if that's available?
Because that's going to take us, as I said, that's going to take us 2 years, a year and a half to 2 years to get,
To get the temporary use bylaw?
To get a temporary use bylaw, absolutely. this community has, you know how it is, anybody who works with a place of worship group, the community buys something, they want to use it right away, and I think that's a reasonable idea. You want to be able to use it. This is, I think, a reasonable request under the Committee of Adjustment process. I think the committee has the power to make this approval, and we are fully committed to the rezoning process. The temporary use process is just going to have that building sitting there vacant for 2 years.
Okay, Ms. Toffler? Sorry, Mr. Crouch, go ahead.
Through you to staff, is that true? It'd take 2 years to get a temporary use bylaw?
I can't confirm that that's correct. A temporary use bylaw will have to come with the necessary documentation, and staff are, relative to the workload and the complex of the application, try to move things forward as quickly as possible. With recent changes to staff processes resulting from the changes to the Planning Act, we're disposing of applications significantly more quickly now, including temporary use bylaw amendments.
But more quickly may mean 2 years.
No, actually, staff under the recent changes are looking at making decisions on applications within the decision-making period, which for zoning bylaw amendments is 150 days.
Well, okay, so I appreciate staff's enthusiasm. I have a pre-application in with the City of Brampton. It's taken 2 months. I still just got a response on the pre-application. Pre-application should just be in and out in a week. It tells you, okay, you've got 3 or 4 studies to do. Here's what they are. You got a zoning bylaw amendment. You've got an OP.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt you. Are you referring to this particular application, or you're just?
No, I'm just giving you an anecdote here that I have an application that's taken 2 months just to get a pre-application response back from the city. So I certainly agree that things should hurry up. I just don't think they're there yet. And I don't think that it would be appropriate in this instance when the Committee of Adjustment has the ability to allow the accessory uses of the Mazamin Center in this site, given the fact that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, my apologies. Just a couple more
No
questions.
problem.
This is to the staff. There seems to be some transition in the area. I noticed that there's an application, there's a board, a notice up just north of the property. It's a busy street. I couldn't stop to review what that was. And also the property to the south, looks like there's some regrading being done. I don't know what's proposed for that area. If you would be able to help us out and understand what's happening.
I can help you out with what's happening around this particular site. To the west and to the south, that driveway all belongs to the golf course, the Brampton Golf Club. The lands beyond that, where the big mess is, belongs to the City of Brampton.
So I would be hopeful that it's not a big mess, that there's something that's being done
Well,
there.
I'm just looking at it from the air photo, and
Okay, so in my personal opinion, what I feel about after listening the more information and before coming to this committee, I can see this place of worship is there for a number of years, and the next door property being available, and with the community grows, I can see, there are always some space where we all need with the time. So that was the good step for them instead of moving the entire place to somewhere else in the future. So in terms of the uses, I do understand where staff is coming from, but at the same time, under previous Children's Aid Society, they had pretty much, even though there was a group home as per the report, but pretty much had the similar uses. So my point of view is I am inclined to support for the temporary period. But again, it's up to the rest of the committee members how they wish to deal with.
Are you making a motion?
Well, I would like to discuss with Ms. Corzola, because what we have, the drafted conditions, if we can, if staff wants to add something, so I'll be more than happy to listen to that.
So she's added a building permit for use change.
That would be the only thing I would request. I would defer to my colleagues in planning whether there are any additional either site improvements or conditions that they would like to see imposed on a temporary approval. It might be helpful to see them up on the screen again. Sorry.
These.
The conditions that you've
Yes.
drafted. Sorry, three.
We're happy to add the condition that we apply for change of use permit.
So just for the clarity, Ms. Carzola, if you can please repeat the exact wording for the condition number 5.
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair, that the applicant apply for and obtain a change of use building permit.
Is there any time frame, number of days?
I say prior to the commencement of the use. It would be the only deciding factor. As far as I know, it's not being used, you know, in contravention of the building code and zoning bylaw at this time. We don't have any outstanding orders to comply, so as long as it's in advance of the use of the building for those purposes, I don't have any concern with the time frame.
Okay. Any other question by the committee members? Any comment?
Is that amended condition acceptable for the applicant?
Yes, it is.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just, I'm not sure if you're going to make a motion, but what I would suggest as well, that a zoning application be made within 1 year of the committee's decision, should we decide to approve.
Thank you. I think we can agree to that. Can we just sort of refine it a little bit, that the applicant make a pre-consultation application within 1 year? Because they're two different things, and as I just mentioned, the pre-application can sit at city staff for a little while, and that's what triggers the reports that we have to get. So we have to get traffic study, an engineering report, functional servicing, all of those things takes time, and that's what you need to make a complete application. I don't think we can do all that in 1 year. I think we can certainly apply for the pre-consultation process within 1 year.
Thank you.
Staff?
Staff would not be supportive of that condition and would concur with the member's initial proposal of filing a zoning bylaw amendment application within 1 year. Pre-consultation applications set out what's required. That application could be filed tomorrow and establish what study components are required, and the applicant could begin work on those almost immediately, and in which case a year would be sufficient to file an application.
Well, I think what I've built into that year is the fact that the congregation has to figure out what they want to do with the site. It's not like tomorrow we're ready to submit for a rezoning because we don't know what we want to do on the site. So I've built in, 6 months to 8 months to 10 months for the congregation to actually know what they want to do, and then we'll make the pre-consultation application. Then we'll go through with the studies. I think that's a reasonable request.
I do understand the fact that as a group from the Islamic Center, they jointly need to decide that what could be the future of this next door property, and I understand. And in fact, even though pretty much the similar uses was going on to the next door property, I applaud the Islamic Center people for going through the proper channel.
And I think that's important, as Ms. Corzola mentioned, they have not been using this site since they purchased it. It's sat vacant, and they've done that in respect to the Committee of Adjustment, the City of Brampton's bylaws, and they've gone through the proper process to request permissions to allow them to use it. We've got conditions, we'll fulfill those conditions, and we'll also go, as I said, this is the first step, we'll move towards rezoning.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just if we can reach a better place for the application of rezoning or the pre-consultation application. The reason I say that is we've got something in front of us from the city where they're looking to refuse this. I think you're finding some sympathies. I'm hearing some sympathies from the committee's standpoint. I think your congregation has been very diligent in both retaining you and providing the presentation, and not occupying the space. We see that often before us. So as the chairman has said, we appreciate the process that you've undertaken. It's very significant to us. In future, for my purposes, I'd like to see what temporary applications for occupancy would look like, because this is the first that we've heard of it, and that might help us in the future. But I don't think I would tie that to this application. I tend to be also very business-oriented. I know this is not a business, but maybe I'll rephrase that as being proactive. So if we're looking to approve this application against some of the city's comments, I would hope that we could endeavor to speed up the process a little bit. And I'm not as familiar as you are with processes or with the city, but is there a way that we could do that?
Certainly. I mean, I think from our standpoint, as I said, it's not like they want to get this approval and then sit on it. Our congregation will make sure that we go through and decide what we want to do on this site. The city has indicated that they're working through to improve the process. We'll be ready, and we'll get it in, and everything will come together in hopefully a speedy manner. And you made a good point. This is not a business. This is not a developer. This is a community group, and you know how it is. You meet, and somebody decides they want this kind of a thing on the site, and somebody decides they want that. We got to come up with some consensus before we get to that rezoning application. That's why I just want to be careful about what we're actually committing to today.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
I would, with regard, with respect to the applicant and the congregation, in order to facilitate and encourage the applicant to deal with the use-related matters, I would suggest that if the committee decides to adopt these conditions, that the temporary period be reduced to 2 years, at which time the application can be evaluated, consideration can be given to whether that application has been filed, the rezoning application has been filed, and the consideration as to how the operations will function at that time.
Mm-hmm.
That's not enough time. 2 years is not enough time for the
Sorry, if I may get clear from the staff, you said 2 or 3?
I said 2.
Okay.
But it's, I just, the issue is, the staff have been clear about the rationale for the recommended refusal. We do want to see the matters resolved on a more permanent basis, so that's the underlying nature of the comment.
I'm not saying we won't get there. I'm just saying I don't want to put us in a position where we've got to be back in front of the committee in 2 years, when I know that the congregation has to come up with what it wants to do, and the rezoning process, I mean, I'm sure you can talk to staff after and find how many rezoning applications were completed within 2 years. It would be a low number. So I think I have to protect the congregation here. I have to protect my client, and I know, I've been here, I know how long it takes to get projects approved. The pre-application process takes a while, the rezoning process takes a while, and quite frankly, on our side, it's going to take a while, because we've got to hire consultants. We've got to hire those engineers, the traffic engineers, the functional servicing engineers, the architects, the landscape architects, arborists, all of those things have to be hired. So it's a lot of work, not just on the city side, it's also on our side that we have to, do the fundraising for and make sure that we've got those consultants on board. So I just think 2 years is just not enough. And that's why I think 5 years is a reasonable request. We'll be there, I'm sure, before 5 years, but I just don't want to put us in a position where we have to come back when I know that there are always things that come up in the processing of applications.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant. What if the condition were to read obtaining a temporary use bylaw within 2 years?
I think it's the same thing, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Member Crouch. I think it's just not enough time for us to get that done. Again, we've got to decide what we want on it, and we don't, like what I'm saying here, and I'm not sure if you're thinking we're going to use this house as a place of worship, that it may stay, but because they haven't gone through this needs analysis, it may go. and that, parking lots here, maybe the temple is expanded, we don't know yet. So we've got to go through that process.
And the temple does have sewer services.
The temple has, yes, they put in the services, so they were the first
Yeah,
ones in
familiar with that.
2004 or 2000, yeah, so this building came before that. So I just, again, I just want to make sure that the committee understands that process is not a 2-year process.
We do, I do understand where staff is coming from, and I applaud their work as well with all these concerns and bringing forward now. But at the same time, I do feel that we have this decision to make in front of us, and if once the temporary period is, if the committee wishes to allow for the temporary period, in my opinion, sooner or later, the Islamic Center has to decide what's the future for this anyway. And even if we go right now and approve, for example, less than 5 years, and their circle is not fully finished within that time frame, they will be in front of the committee anyway. So, and again, this is not something permanent. The committee is considering at this point, but I'm open for I'm open for anywhere between 4 to 5 years of this conditional approval.
Is that a motion?
Well, it's, I can put forward a motion unless the committee wishes to say something further or put forward a motion. I'll be happy to work with.
Would it be appropriate if the committee decides to provide for the temporary use that there is also a condition, as with number 2, no additional parking be provided on site, that no residences be provided on site?
Absolutely, we could live with that.
Sorry, could you please repeat, Mr. Crouch?
That no residences
Oh.
will be permitted on site.
Yeah, and that's in keeping with our contention that the site is going to be less used now than or less used once we're in than it was previously.
And representation that the bedrooms will not be utilized.
Exactly.
Okay, so looking for a motion to proceed.
Motion to approve with the applicant's conditions of approval and adding condition number 5, that the applicant shall apply and obtain a change of use permit, and number 6, that no residences will be permitted on site.
So we have a motion.
And I'd also written down the applicant make a pre-consultation within 1 year.
Perfect, yes. So add item number 7, the applicant make a pre-application within 1 year of the committee's decision.
So just for the clarity, the committee, there's a motion has been put forward on the table. The conditions are, there are like total 7 conditions at this point. The one is the motion that the site 7570 Kennedy Road South only be utilized for the accessory use of the place of worship, including parking, faith-based instruction or teaching and administrative offices. The second is no parking provided on site. The third is the temporary period for 5 years. The fourth is failure to comply. And the fifth is change of use. And the sixth is no residents will be on the site. And the 7th is the primary consultation?
Pre-consultation.
Pre-consultation application to be proceed within 1 year.
Yes.
From committee's decision.
Seconded.
Motion put forward by Ms. Doppler, seconded by Mr. Crouch. All in favor? Yes. So So motion is carried.
Thank you very much for your time.
Calling application A18077, Darren and Christina Hallan, and the property is located at 46 Fairglen Avenue.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairperson, members of committee and staff. Our home is currently the city for site plan approval under file number SP 18-031-000. We are proposing interior alterations and a second-story addition patio and pool. The second-story addition is over the existing footprint as well as extensive the ground floor patio. Our application today is to seek relief for the encroachment of the second story into the side yard setback and increase in the lot coverage. Because we are building on the existing footprint, we are only able to provide 1.522 meters of interior side yard setback, where the minimum is 1.8 is required. With regards to the lot coverage, the maximum permitted lot coverage is 30%. We seek a relief of 31.7. We are seeking relief of the legal non-conforming side yard setback of 0.465, where 0.6 is required. That's it.
Okay. Committee members, is there any question to the applicant? Seeing none?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to confirm that the speaker is the actual homeowner.
Yes, I am. I think yes.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience wishes to speak on this particular application? Seeing none? Staff, could you please weigh in with your comments? Sorry, before we go further, I would like to include on record there are letter of support from property owners at 43 Fairglen Avenue, 44, 48, 49, and 50 Fairglen Avenue. A letter of support on record. Thank you. Staff?
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff recommend that application A18-077 is supportable, subject to the following conditions being imposed. One, that the variance be approved to the general extent as shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. And two, that the failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Okay. Is there any question, comment? If none, I'd like to see a motion. Motion to approve with condition by Mr. The homeowner, are you in agreement?
Yeah, as long as it stays the way it is on the plan, right? Correct?
Yep.
Yes, that's fine.
So motion has been put forward by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Ms. Stoffler. All in favor? Yes. Thank you. Motion is passed. Congratulations.
Calling applications A18078 through to A18080. Property Scottish Heather Development Inc. Properties at 40, 42, and 50 Elysian Fields Circle.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, staff. My name is Steve Safranius. I'm with Draft Design and Bloom's Architect. And I'm guessing that we're going to look at all three applications sort of simultaneously.
Sure.
They all deal with rear yard setbacks. What I can tell you is that these lands owned by Scottish Heather Development, what we do at the beginning of a subdivision that's going to be going to sale is we review all the lots to see what houses fit. These three lots are slightly undersized from what's nearby, and as such, they've remained unsold to date. Part of the reason is that the houses that would fit are less desirable than other houses, and these other houses that have a slightly bigger footprint. As such, we have selected houses that we believe are, minor as far as variance request is concerned. And I'd also like to just point out that in the case of Lot 193, that's application 7, 9, yeah. That particular house actually is reduced in length already. So the variance sought after is slightly better than if we were to have gone with a typical version of that particular model type. And then 197, you'll notice at the rear, that's application 80, you'll notice a little bump out at the back, which if it were not there, we wouldn't, I think we'd still be here, but yeah, I don't even know if that would affect it in a big way. But the point is, we actually reduced this house for 197 to fit, and when we went to site and grade it, we found out that the survey had changed. And it's changed by just over 4 inches, or just under 0.15 of a meter. And then, so the house had been sold in the meantime. The purchaser accepted the original reduction, and the builder decided not to go back and explain to them that they need a second reduction. So in that case, we're going for variance.
Okay. Any questions so far by the committee members to the applicant? Seeing none. Anyone in the audience wishes to speak on these applications? Seeing none. Staff, could you please weigh in your comments on these 3 applications?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll read the conditions. These 3 conditions will apply to each of the variances. They're the same for all 3 applications.
Okay.
So staff recommend that applications A1878, A1879, and A1880 are supportable subject to the following conditions being imposed on each variance. That the variances be approved only to the extent indicated in the sketch attached to the public notice. Number 2, that a clause be included within the agreement of purchase and sale for the property advising of the variances affecting the property. In the event the property has been sold, the applicant shall provide written confirmation to the Secretary Treasurer that the purchaser acknowledges and accepts the variance, and that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee will render the variance null and void.
Thank you. To the applicant, are you in agreement with these
Yeah, the
conditions?
conditions are all acceptable for all 3 applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Having said that, looking for a motion if there's no further questions.
Motion to approve the conditions.
All 3 applications? Okay. Motion put forward by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Ms. Doffler. All in favor? Yes, motion is carried. These are approved.
Thank
We
you.
see Scottish Heather more often than anybody else. Boy,
Yeah.
you're shoehorning things in.
Okay. Actually, I might be back. There's a couple lots that they just found out they own next to the east, so.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. See you later.
Calling application A18082, Harnsworth Builders, Inc. Property is located at 76 Wentworth Court.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, members of staff and members of the public. My name is Courtney Heron-Monk and I'm a planner with Weston Consulting, who are the agent to the owner. I have a few initial remarks about the application, which is to permit the sorting, bulking, and storage and transfer of non-hazardous waste and temporary storage and consolidation of hazardous waste at the subject site, which is adjacent to an open space zone. The property is zoned Industrial 3 and subject to exception 1565, which permits the intended use but not on lands within 300 meters of an open space zone. No new development is proposed on the site, and the use would be wholly contained within the existing building. We have reviewed the staff report and are aware of the comments of the various agencies, which don't identify any concerns. We have no objections to the conditions recommended by City Planning in their letter dated May 29th. In our opinion, the application meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and we request committee approve the application.
Thank you. Committee members, is there any question to the applicant? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience who wish to speak on this particular application? Mr. Gagnon, are you here for this application?
Yes, I am.
Please.
Mr. Chairman, I'm here with Mr. Denardis from GWD, and he's going to hand out a letter. We're also here with our clients who are the owners of 50 Wentworth Court.
In the meantime, just for the record, I would like to acknowledge the letter from TRCA. They have no objection for this application.
Wonder if we can tone down the light. Yeah. Well, Mr. DeNardis, perhaps you could just point out for the committee where our client is at 50 and then where 76 is.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman, 50 Wentworth is located directly here, and if you look at your letter, it's the property highlighted in blue, and the subject site that's subject to this application is located immediately next to it, highlighted in red, and the open space zone is just immediately behind it.
So, Mr. Chairman, through you to the committee, to be clear, what we understand is that from the previous speakers, the applicant's comments, so we were wondering if it was hazardous and non-hazardous waste, and it appears that that's the case. And I also note for the record that the variance request is quite a list of products or materials that could be stored on this property: solid waste, non-hazardous waste, power generation fuel, hazardous waste transfer of chemicals, manufacturing, intermediaries, medical waste. And I guess medical waste would be body parts, arms, legs, aborted fetuses, tumors. I guess anything that comes out of a body that would be considered a medical waste. That also extends not just to humans but to animals, because there's a reference to veterinary and then pathological waste. Not sure what pathological waste is, so maybe the appellant or the staff who are supporting this could tell us what that is, so we all know. There's also a reference to medical sterilization, and I guess what's clear is that all of this waste is not allowed to be located within 300 meters of an open space zone. And I'm just going to ask Mr. DeNardis to point out on the plan, because the lighting is pretty poor, where is that 300 meters in relation to the open space category?
So through you, Mr. Chair, 300 meters, we've taken it from the rear property lines of all the lands that are part of this subdivision and applied an offset of 300 meters. And you can clearly see that not only our client's property, but also the applicant's property falls within the back half of that 300 meters. So they're well within that buffer range. My general understanding of the provision is that if you would like this type of use, you're supposed to be on the other side of this yellow line. So anything.
Just draw the yellow line, Mr. DeNardis, for the audience to see.
This is the 300 meter offset from the rear property lines that abut the open space zone.
So it's a large area. So in that area.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Gagnon. Mr. DeNardis, if you can please point again your client's property.
Yes, it's the one highlighted in blue.
Put an X on it.
Right here. And that is the subject site.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Mr. Gagnon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so the area that's to the east and the north of our client's property and all those other properties is known as the Clairville Conservation Authority area. It is a large zoned open space area. Now, one of the things we note in the staff report, which we found to be a little bit light, is that the staff report does not include information on the kinds of waste specifically which will be transferred and sorted here. We don't know, we have a bit of an idea if it's going to be hazardous or non-hazardous, but we don't know what it means. Is it chemical? Is it medical? Is it veterinary? And again, pathological. We don't know how long they're going to store the waste there. We don't know how the waste will be stored on the property. Is it in metal drums? Is it in plastic containers? Is it in bags? We don't know. We don't know the hours of operation. We don't know the frequency of the deliveries or the tonnage. We don't know the size of the vehicles coming to the site. And we don't know if the existing building needs to be modified to accommodate this use.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, maybe the applicant let the staff listen and they could sit down, or would you like them to open the discussion up?
if the applicant wishes to speak, maybe she can speak after you, but please continue.
We don't know if the waste that's going to be stored has any extraordinary security requirements associated with it, and what and how the site will be secured. This is a little bit tied to the hours of operation. Is there times of the day when the waste will be unsupervised? And that leads to another concern is there an emergency management and evacuation plan? If something happens with the waste, what if there's a fire? What are the implications of that for our client and others that are within this 300-meter area? We're not aware of what MOE requirements are for this type of an application. And we don't know if it's affiliated with another site I'm going to ask Mr. DeNardis to point out. So that's another question. There's a medical and pharmaceutical processing site at Deerhurst Drive, 95.
This location, Mr. Chairman, highlighted in the dashed red. I'm actually just going to flip over to another map that's included in your package. It may help with the audience here, because I know the glare is a little bit confusing, but this is actually taken right from the zoning map. It actually highlights the green open space zone, all the industrial properties, our client's property in the light blue again, the subject property in the solid red, and this second other location identified as 95 Deerhurst Drive, which is in the dashed red.
So, Mr. DeNardis, one more time, just show the limit of the 300 meters and all the properties now that
I think
up
we can
until
see
this
the
time
dotted line
wouldn't be
clearly
expected
at
to
the
have
bottom.
this. Yeah.
I'll just, for purposes of clarification, again, it's 300 meters taken from the limit of the open space zone. So you take an offset 300 meters. This use is really supposed to be intended to be on the outside of this line. And this application proposes to have it right against the most easterly limit of it.
Our clients purchased their property on November 19th, 2015, as part of a plan of subdivision, an industrial subdivision. When they purchased it, it was paved, landscaped, surrounded by a chain link fence and some wood fencing, backing onto the Clairville conservation area. The properties abutting the client's site were and are developed for industrial buildings and associated parking lots. To the best of our knowledge and our clients, other than 95 Deerhurst, there are no other immediately abutting waste processing, transfer, or storage facilities. I've mentioned a little bit about 95 Deerhurst, and we're not sure again if it's affiliated operation, but you can see based on the zoning map here that it is just inside the 300-meter setback. And our understanding from materials we got from the city, and those are attached, is that the facility at 95 Deerhurst was a legal non-conforming operation, and it's located approximately 255 meters from Clairville. So that's about 45 meters shy of the 300 meters that you have to be away from an open space or a residential or an institutional designation to have this type of an operation. Now, one of the conditions for 95 Deerhurst was obtaining site plan approval. We're not sure if they did. That's another question we have for staff, just to try and understand what's happening in the neighborhood. Now, in terms of some of the specific concerns we have, we would like to know what kind of waste is going to be there and how it's going to be stored and how they're going to deal with the management of the waste, because we don't know if there will be odors associated with it, fumes, or noise related to how the site is managed. And that applies to what's in the building and how trucks accessing the site will be operating. We also, secondly, question how it's minor when you go from 300 meters to a 0-meter setback. That's a total elimination. And it certainly seems to suggest that the bylaw requirement serves no purpose at all. It almost diminishes the whole notion of a minimum separation distance between sort of sensitive land uses and what could be considered a very hazardous, through the applicant's own presentation, the storage of and handling of a hazardous waste material, which we don't know what it is. The whole idea is to have this separation distance so that if there is a problem with the processing and the storage, that you don't have an unacceptable impact on a sensitive land use or those people who might be occupying, in this case, the Clairville Conservation Area. Now, in my letter, I've put a quote from the staff, and they've said that, and this is from their report, that the intent of the bylaw in regulating minimum distance requirements between sensitive land uses and industrial uses noted in the variance is to ensure potentially hazardous uses are located at a safe distance from sensitive land uses. That's staff's wording. And that's why there's a 300-meter separation. One would expect, I guess, that Deerhurst is located a considerable distance from this public open space area while it's legal non-conforming, that the use and then the distance separation sort of falls in line with the intent of what the zoning bylaw is trying to achieve by separating these types of uses. Now, staff has suggested that it's okay, the use is inside of a building. That's not the test. The separation is not from the open space or sensitive land use and the building, it's from the property where this activity takes place and the sensitive land use. So I take no comfort in the fact that they're saying, well, it's inside of a building. The trucks accessing the property are outside of the building. We don't know how many trucks are coming to the property. We don't know how long it takes to unload a truck. We don't know if a truck's going to be, if there's a backlog of waste piling up inside or stacked up inside. Could there be trucks parked outside overnight, perhaps for weeks at a time? We just don't know. There's no details in the report. That certainly is a concern. Now, one of the other concerns we have is that when our client purchased their property, they didn't expect to have a neighbor that would have a waste transfer and storage facility. Dare I say that if they would have looked at the bylaw, they would have seen it right there, that they're buying a property that in fact that backs onto an open space area, the Clairville Conservation area, and they don't have a waste transfer or storage facility beside them. I certainly, as a business owner, and our clients don't want to have that activity located immediately adjacent to them. It's not what they expected when they bought this property about 3 years ago. I find it a bit amusing that the staff report is suggesting that the storage and handling of hazardous and non-hazardous waste, which we don't know what kind it is, could be chemical, biological, is on par with other activities that are allowed within this industrial zone. They're suggesting that a concrete batching plant, and there are 2 of them that are existing on this street, are examples of heavy industrial uses. I got to tell you, if I had a choice between a concrete batching plant where they take sand and gravel and put water and make cement, or a transfer station and a storage facility with hazardous waste, I'll take the concrete batching plant any day of the week. A concrete batching plant, to the best of my knowledge, and the other activities that are legally existing within the 300-meter setback are not subjected to that kind of an extraordinary setback. Not at all. That should be telling us something. So I don't think a concrete batching is on par with a waste transfer and storage facility. Now, the fact that we don't have a lot of details about what's going on in this building is a real cause for concern. One would expect, and it's not sufficient in the conditions of approval to say, and one of them suggests, well, you just go back to the materials that were filed. My client's got a notice for this hearing. There's a staff report. That staff report on something like this should include all those details. It shouldn't be the responsibility of the people that are getting the notice to go into the planning department and have to search out the details of an application for a use like this that has a minimum separation distance of 300 meters associated with it. So there isn't enough information to make a decision on this, and certainly we would suggest it be turned down. At a minimum, if it's not turned down, it ought to be deferred until that information is made available. Interestingly enough, and committee members have it, the 8th point I've made here is, you would think that the planning department, being the good stewards of the public interest that they are, would be asking for a lot of information if they were going to introduce a use like this, where they're taking a 300-meter setback and saying, it's okay, you can have 0. You would expect planning justification, public consultation, zoning amendment, EIS, an archaeological assessment. Yes, believe it or not, our clients who have a parking lot were recently asked to prepare an archaeological assessment on a parking lot.
I just want to interrupt you for quick, Mr. Gagnon. Just for my knowledge, could you please tell us what is the nature of business for your client at the property?
Currently, right now, they have, there's a asphalt parking lot, no building on the site. There are vehicles stored there, and our understanding is they are in total compliance with the zoning bylaw. They have made an application for a minor variance application for a concrete batching plant. There are 2 concrete batching plants on the street.
Okay.
No requirement for 300 meters. You could probably safely touch the sand and the gravel and the water. I wouldn't recommend you open up a bin of hazardous medical waste and dip your hands in it. A little bit different sort of business. If a truck on our client's site tips over sand, I don't know what happens if a truck carrying bins of hazardous waste tips over. I suspect you might have to put on a hazmat
I guess
suit.
we will be asking more questions and details to the applicants, whatever falls under our jurisdiction or under our responsibilities. At the same time, I think, and I'm not expert, can talk about the waste at this point, unless I go and study something on it. But I'm sure the authorities here or the ministries, there must be some guidelines, and the people who are interested in opening this facility here, they must be complying or following those guidelines, or at the end, they must need the final yes before they proceed.
Well, regrettably, one of those guidelines is a 300-meter setback, and they're not following that. They're not even coming close to it. They're not doing anything. There's no setback. Now, we'd also suggest that there be a traffic impact study. We'd like to know how many trucks. I don't know how many trucks of material come in a day. There should be a sweep path analysis. The building that's on that site is quite large. There's only really an open area. The largest open area is on the north side, adjacent to our client's property. What happens with stormwater management if there's a spill? Don't know. And I did do some research. It's fascinating if you go online and see what constitutes hazardous waste in the province of Ontario. What constitutes medical waste? One thing that you're allowed, doesn't fall into medical waste, is hair and nail clippings. I found that out in preparing for today. But the other things I mentioned, limbs, tumors, body, all this stuff, it's fair game. Yeah. What about air pollution, odor, and noise? And a very important requirement would be emergency management and evacuation plan. I imagine the city, all the other owners here would like to know what happens if there's a major catastrophe at this facility. What do you do? How do you contain a spill? What happens if there's a fire? What's released into the air? So I think that there are certainly enough questions and concerns.
Sure.
And the fact that this application is not saying, look, we can provide 75% of the setback. There are intervening lands and roads between us and the sensitive land use. That's not the case here. This application is for a transfer and storage facility, but right up against the Clairville Conservation Authority lands. We don't believe this is minor. We don't believe that there's sufficient information, certainly, to grant an approval for this application. And we don't believe that the conditions of approval advanced by staff, which direct the reader to go find another document, is an appropriate condition of approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on this application? Before I ask, as I can see, the applicant wishes to speak again. If at this point any question, any of my fellow committee member wishes to ask to Mr. Gagnon or to the staff, or maybe we can just wait to hear everybody and then. Okay, so applicant, please.
It's a little hard to read and understand. It's bright. Just to offer a bit of background. So
Maybe you can zoom in this.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So Stericycle is the company that proposes to operate out of the subject lands. Their current operations occur over here at 19 Armthorpe Road. The company employs up to 60 people, including an additional 30 that drive trucks in and out of the property. And their processing facility is located at 95 Deerhurst Drive, where the processing of the waste occurs, including incineration. None of that would take place on the subject property. And it's hard to see, but there's a blue line, semicircular, which denotes other waste management facilities in the area.
With the similar waste?
In this area here.
Okay.
I have some more on it. I just wanted to reiterate that the Toronto Region Conservation Authority has no objections to our application. There are no passive recreational uses or activities that take place in the lands adjacent to our client's property. In terms of security, there is a fence that's protected under lock and key that is on the perimeter, or at least the front of the property. It's denoted on the variance sketch that's included in our application. 2 gates that protect access to the back, or the rear, sorry, of the property. The site does grade away from the open space zone. I performed a site visit, and the runoff goes towards the south, away from the open space zone. There is the required fencing around the perimeter of the site, including between the site and the open space zone. And I just wanted to remind members of the committee and our neighbor that this operation cannot move forward without MOECC approval, which is underway. The application has been submitted and is currently under review. As a planner, I can't speak to the technical nature of the business. I have a representative from Stericycle here who can answer any detailed questions about the nature of the operations that would occur inside the building.
Please. Or you wish to continue first and then at the end of your submission, the gentleman?
Pardon me?
I said that if the person is here, the person wish to speak now or maybe after you, it's up to you.
Good morning. My name is Dan Kokel. I work for Stericycle Environmental Compliance.
Sorry, your name and address again, please.
Dan Kokel.
Okay.
I work for Stericycle as an environmental compliance specialist for Ontario and Eastern Canada. My office is currently in the 95 Deerhurst building, so I am here to answer any questions if anyone has anything of a technical nature on the building. Again, the proposed operations for 76 Wentworth are currently occurring at 19 Armthorpe. The reason for relocation is the lease is expiring on our 19 Armthorpe facility, and instead of renewing, the operations would prefer to expand to a larger facility to accommodate ease of parking for the vehicles.
Okay, so by when the lease is expiring at 19 Armthorpe?
The lease is expiring in December of this year.
Okay. And right now at 19 Armthorpe, the exactly same.
The exact same operation is taking place. With our submission to the Ministry of Environment for approval, we are not asking for any new conditions, we're not asking for any changes from what is currently happening at 19 Armthorpe Road. So essentially, they are taking the current operations and moving to a new location. In terms of truck traffic, for ease of business, 76 Wentworth is closer to the processing site at 95 Deerhurst Drive. It would minimize movement of vehicles in between the two facilities, which currently take place.
Okay. As I said earlier, I'm not an expert in regards to this particular facility. It does not fall under, that's what I feel, under our jurisdiction. But I'm sure with all the ministries' approvals and or their final reports may address some of the concerns the immediate next door neighbor's agent indicated earlier.
Well, that is correct. Prior to any use of the site for waste storage or management, an approval from the Ministry of Environment is required, so they do have to issue an environmental compliance approval before Stericycle can actually move into the facility and use it.
Committee member?
What hazardous waste do you process?
At the facility at the 19 Armthorpe Road, and the majority of it is consumer goods that are no longer of use. They do fall under, many of them fall under hazardous waste categories. For example, something like sunscreen, when it goes for final disposal, if it's no longer used, no longer sellable, it is disposed of as a hazardous waste. If it's an aerosolized container, it's under the Ministry of Environment's guidelines, it's disposed of as a flammable substance, because the propellant inside most of those materials are flammable. There's a lot of materials that are of no longer use. A lot of pharmaceutical manufacturers use Stericycle for final disposal, where the material is transferred in sealed containers into the building, stored, and then sent off to additional sites for disposal, depending on the nature of it, whether it be hazardous or non-hazardous. Anything that's hazardous must be incinerated at a hazardous waste facility. The 95 Deerhurst Site Drive is the only one in Ontario right now that is a licensed hazardous waste incineration facility. Other than that, we do use Emerald Energy or other final disposal sites within Ontario for our non-hazardous materials.
And in the minority of what you do, does it include medical waste?
The 95 Deerhurst Drive site is the main medical waste processing facility, so they accept medical waste from all over the province of Ontario. The facility has been in operation since 1992, I believe, as a medical waste processing facility. I started working for Stericycle in 2009, and the entire time we've been there, it has been a medical waste processing and incineration facility. So it is medical waste, and the general term is, when we're training our staff, medical waste is anything that basically has come in contact with blood or bodily fluids. So any and all of the above that you may consider, we collect from non-anatomical waste to anatomical and pharmaceutical waste and cytotoxic materials. It is all in sealed containers it has to meet with the requirements of the Ministry of Environment in terms of their guidelines for the collection and disposal of waste. Again, everything we collect is in sealed containers. We don't propose any outdoor storage, and we do have to comply with all the ministry's guidelines in terms of operation of business. At the 76 Wentworth site, there would be no processing of medical waste. It is included in the permit and the application because we will be intending to use it as our truck yard.
Thank you.
Any other question by committee member to the specialist here?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know if it's for the applicant. The building as it currently stands, 76 Wentworth, if you were to take it over, would there be a change in use required?
For the building itself, no. It would be strictly a warehousing there, and there would be interior renovations to the offices and to the warehouse facility. To the external parts of the building, other than security improvements on the fence if needed, and the yarding, there would be no additional changes to the use.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the property is vacant at the moment.
Okay. So, if there is no further question to the applicant at this point, I would like to, sorry, Mr. Crouch, please go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So your application says to permit non-hazardous solid waste processing use. It doesn't say to permit solid waste warehousing use, which you've just said you're using it for storage and doing the processing on Deerhurst.
Is that, through you, Mr. Chair, where are you reading that?
Oh, in the public notice,
Oh,
whereas the applicant is requesting the following variance, and that starts off the sentence. I see transfer use that I could read as warehousing, but now I also see power generation, which certainly concerns me with respect to air quality, solid waste processing, which is inconsistent with what we just heard from the engineer. I share Mr. Gagnon's concerns. I don't know what's going to go on in this building.
So in this building, I can speak to the current operation, 19 Armthorpe Road. In terms of solid waste processing, the site is only permitted to process non-hazardous materials. So in terms of solid waste processing, it is shredding of packaging, bulking of non-hazardous materials for final disposal. Stericycle does not engage in any power generation at any of our facilities. The waste that we do send off-site in terms of disposal of non-hazardous materials, we do use Emerald Energy, which is located in Brampton, which is a waste-to-energy facility for a final disposal site for many of our non-hazardous materials. And our site at 19 Armthorpe is permitted as a waste transfer station and disposal of non-hazardous materials. So anything that could currently go to a non-hazardous landfill can be processed, repackaged, and sent off for final destruction.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gannon, you wish to speak again?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess one of the things that's a bit confusing, and I think through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Crouch, he picked up on the issue of warehousing, which perhaps could be what's been described as storage, but there's something more disturbing that came out through the supplementary presentation. The application, if I heard correctly, at the ministry includes processing. It's not restricted to the transfer and storage. It sounds as though that license will be for A to Z waste, processing, transfer, and storage. That is a concern. Another concern is that, if I heard correctly, the only facility that's licensed in Ontario is the one at 95 Deerhurst. Sounds like that's, you know, a situation that would beg another facility to be opened up so that you don't have to transfer the material from 76 to 95. I don't know if that's the end goal here. And we keep hearing, well, the Ministry of the Environment, the Ministry of the Environment. The City of Brampton has a role to play in this as well, and that's in their bylaw where they say 300 meters. That's a requirement every bit as legitimate as the requirements that the ministry will advance. The committee may be aware that there was a quarry application proposed on the west side of the City of Brampton. Our clients opposed that. We had budgeted $4 million to fight that quarry proposal. The application was withdrawn by the proponents after dates were set to start the hearing. We had mounted a fierce opposition and they collapsed their application. We heard there that the ministry this, the ministry that, but thankfully the City of Brampton in that circumstance said, you know what, we as a city have requirements as well. And my submission to you is, we don't know what's going to go on here. The application, and through you again to Mr. Crouch, the description is for everything. Fuel, chemical, medical, whatever. And if once that license is granted, dare I say, we're not really going to have much to say about what's going on in there unless complaints are filed with the ministry. But by then, it might be a little bit late. And if, in fact, they're just going to store and transfer, there's nothing to say to stop them, I guess, from saying, well, now we're going to process it because the truck's already showing up there. So rather than taking a load, putting it in the building, organizing it, and then putting it back on a truck and driving, around the block, why don't we just put an incinerator here and away we go? There must be a reason there's a 300-meter setback. It's being brought down to 0. I got to tell you, 95 Deerhurst, 255 meters. Legal non-conforming, not much we can do about it, but thankfully it's a good distance. And I would say, 45 meters seems minor. At least there's a suggestion that we separate these types of uses. I would be very concerned that this application be approved and the municipality then lose control about what's happening on that site adjacent to Clairville. The fact that there isn't a playing field there, Clairville Conservation Authority is a zoned, open space zoned piece of land that serves a purpose in this city. It's an open space area, it's pristine, people can go there and enjoy that open space. To suggest that, there's no active activities there, so, well, it's okay, it's not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal if something happens and that area is spoiled. It's also a big deal because our clients in 2015 didn't buy a piece of land beside a waste facility abutting their property line. And we still don't know how long the waste will be stored there. We don't know how many trucks are coming. We don't know the frequency of the transfer.
Well, I guess we can have some more information from staff regarding some of the concerns you have brought up, Mr. Gagnon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience wishes to speak on this application? Seeing none, I would like to ask staff if, because by now, I guess before staff was prepared to speak less, but now I guess there's many questions up there. So please see what the best you can do.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did receive the letter and listened to the delegates' comments and read the letter dated today. I note that this is the applicant or the agent representing the earlier item on the community adjustment agenda regarding the proposed concrete batching plant. When staff evaluated the application, consideration was given to the fact that this is a relocation, that similar existing activities has been occurring on that property would continue on this property. And in addition, introduced some restrictions on activity on the site to prevent outdoor storage, recognize and confirm that the use was going to be wholly contained within the buildings on the property. And in addition, added the condition that if any changes were to occur beyond those set out in the documentation, that staff would undertake a further review of this material to ensure that the activities were indeed similar to those as were occurring on the other property. And so on that basis, staff recommended approval.
Okay.
It's indicated that outdoor storage would not be permitted, and yet we've been told the purpose of acquiring a large parcel of land was for parking. Is it now the position of the city of Brampton that parking trailers with hazardous or non-hazardous waste in them is not outside storage?
Through the chair, the intent was to have no, I guess, materials of any sort stored outdoor on the property, that all those materials would be handled inside.
So, but if we took your recommendation and said, go with it, no outside storage be permitted, would that foreclose them from parking trailers on the property?
Staff were paying closest attention to the question of whether or not the separation space was sufficient, and whether or not that there was a risk of any materials escaping the building and somehow crossing the property line and creating off-site impact. And that was the basis for staff's recommendation.
So you would agree then that condition 2 should be amended to properly reflect some parking or not?
If I may offer some clarification. By virtue of the condition that's been recommended by planning staff, outside storage of oversized motor vehicles would not be permitted. So the trucks carrying the materials would be required to be loaded and unloaded and relocated off-site to be stored elsewhere. Nor would they be permitted to store waste of any kind, whether it's in enclosed bins on this site, despite the fact that the underlying zone includes some permission for outside storage. So that with respect to vehicle parking of personal vehicles that are not oversized in nature, that would still be permitted to occur, and certainly loading and unloading of the oversized motor vehicles could also occur.
Mr. Chair, the applicant indicated that parking was a requirement. I don't know whether that is pedestrian vehicle or...
The workers?
I don't know whether it's cars or trucks. May we ask the applicant that?
Sure. Applicant, if you can please answer to Mr. Crouch's question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would be personal vehicles for the employees and trucks to load and haul waste off of the site.
And trucks would, once loaded, they would leave the site immediately? I mean, how do you police something like that?
So with the current operations at 19 Armthorpe Road, trucks come into the site loaded with waste. They're offloaded into the building. At times, with the Ministry of Environment's approvals, we are allowed storage in terms of medical waste up to 12 hours in a sealed vehicle, sealed refrigerated vehicle or trailers. And within the Ministry of Environment's current approvals for 19 Armthorpe under our transportation ECA, there is storage of up to 30 days in enclosed trailers for non-medical waste. So waste that does not meet the definitions of medical waste. So,
but it may meet the definition of hazardous waste.
Hazardous waste, correct.
Ms. Stoffler, please go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there might be a little bit of irony in my site visit on Saturday. It was late afternoon. I drove to the end of the court because I wanted to understand what was happening in the area. I understand that there is waste management going on. There's concrete batch plant at the end. It was a little bit windy, so there was dust that was moving back and forth, which is slightly concerning. But even worse, there were black billows of smoke beyond Deerhurst. And I wasn't aware of what was going on. I thought it was actually exhaust from some sort of facility. But it turns out there was something that was burning. The roads were closed off. So to this moment, I don't know what was happening. It smelled like it was either asphalt or tires or something. So I guess the point is a valid one, that if something happens, it sounds like your company has been very diligent in the operation that you've been carrying on. But I think for me, the concern is that there are so many different requests under the variance that are a little bit complicated for us to understand on this side of things. And then to Mr. Gagnon's point, just if there is something that occurs, how is that dealt with, especially being that it's right at the edge of the conservation lands?
So in terms of any spill mitigation, if spills are detected, mitigation has to be taken care of immediately. So Ministry of Environment has to be notified. Appropriate spill cleanup teams have to be deployed to the sites as well. With the waste that Stericycle hauls, we do not anticipate any large types of spills or natural upsets to the natural environment. We do not deal in tanker truck loads. We deal in sealed closed containers, and the majority of materials that are brought to the 19 Armthorpe Road are consumer goods or unsellable goods. It's in terms of business description, it's been described as reverse logistics. And again, many consumer goods, once taken off the shelves, are considered a hazardous waste for disposal when it comes to final disposal of the materials. At the 19 Armthorpe facility, again, there is no processing of hazardous wastes that take place on site. Wastes are brought in, consolidated into loads, and sent off to other final disposal sites. Any processing that does take place is of non-hazardous materials, packaging, etc. In terms of medical waste, all that processing does take place at Deerhurst Drive. They would be utilizing the parking lot area for storage of those trucks prior to transfer to the Deerhurst site for disposal.
So just as a further comment, I was also involved in the Mississauga train derailment. We lived within the area that had to be evacuated. Something like that hasn't occurred in the GTA. I think since then it's occurred elsewhere in the world or elsewhere in the country, but there still is a possibility that it can happen. And I guess the question has been raised about being directly adjacent to the conservation lands, because if something were to happen, then it spills over into that area. There's been conversation about aerosol cans. As far as I'm aware, they're explosive. I'm sure that you're very diligent in how you deal with these aspects. Obviously, you've been doing this for quite a while. You probably have an extremely detailed process in play. I haven't dealt with your company. I've dealt with some others of a similar nature. there's quite an onerous requirement for health and safety
Yes.
to be in place, so I recognize that. But I think right now, the concern for me would be directly adjacent to the Conservation Authority and the rather detailed and all-encompassing items that fall under the variance.
Just to comment on the other speakers' comments with processing of medical waste at the 76 Wentworth Drive. In terms of the 95 Deerhurst Drive being the only licensed building, I should clarify on that, it's the only licensed medical waste and hazardous waste incinerator in the province of Ontario. Stericycle currently does not have any plans to develop another medical waste incinerator within the province, and the 76 Wentworth Drive certainly would not be a site that would be proposed for that activity. And again, with waste, any type of hazardous waste management, approvals need to be granted by the Ministry of Environment before any activities can take place.
For you, Mr. Chair, could I just ask staff if, being a facility of this nature, given the items that they deal with, is this more a Ministry of the Environment undertaking to review than a city requirement? And in terms of the city requirement that's been brought up, that being the 300 meters, what is the city's view on this application?
Through the chair, my understanding is that the ministry requires land use approval in order to issue their permit. So they contemplate and they obviously govern all the activities on the site. And so it's a kind of a chicken or the egg kind of scenario. So that's kind of the extent of my knowledge about MO. But Ministry of Environment obviously does oversee and regulate all the activities on the site. And so to some extent, staff are relying on the ministry permit to some extent to govern use with regard to the activities in the building. However, we are of the understanding that this is a storage and a kind of facility where goods are kind of prepared for movement to another facility as opposed to processing.
Just to follow up on that,
Sure.
Is it possible then, both from the applicant standpoint and from the city standpoint, that we decrease what is being requested? Because I think a point has been made that processing could sometime in the future take place if for some reason your company decides to sell either the business or the building. This would be in place and somebody could proceed with exactly what's being asked here, which is a little bit confusing to us sitting here and concerning.
From the Ministry of Environment standpoint, if Stericycle were to sell the facility to another corporation, that corporation would have to apply for an approval through the Ministry of Environment. The approvals aren't transferable from company to company. Applications for ministry approval have to be made.
Okay.
So just in terms of the question of reducing down what is being requested, because it sounds as if you're fairly specific in what your operation does, but the variances being requested are quite expansive and seem to be encompassing a lot more than what you would be doing.
In terms of this, we do not do any power generation, fuel consumption use.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would be able to remove the power generation fuel combustion use from the list of uses.
But to the applicant, at the same time, I personally just don't want to feel that right now, after all the discussion, you decide to make some changes now and down the road, you come with another application for another variance. If you feel at this point that there has to be more communication with the city, and I was going to ask that to staff as well, that if city staff has any sort of communication with the ministry, or that satisfied the question being raised today here, or if the applicant would like to provide more information on that to the staff and wishes to come here on a later date with more detailed information regarding all these variances, I personally would like to look into that as well.
So, staff, if the applicant is requesting a deferral, then staff are agreeable to that to review the additional information, and in light of the comments that are raised in the discussion, if that's the direction that the committee wants to go or the applicant wants to take, staff are supportive of that.
Because I personally feel that at this point, if I personally don't want to say or force to anyone about removing any particular use, because I'm not an expert on that particular use, unless the owner brings some more, the applicant brings some more information which satisfy the city and the neighbors. I know it's, and I might be wrong if even we defer this application and we just come back to the similar information. But if the parties feels that there might be some new information which satisfy some sort of all these concerns to the neighbor, at the same time, I personally feel that this business is already in the within the same few, not even a block from the facility. And that's why I ask when is the lease is being expired. I would like to see that time frame going, because there might be some people, workers might be working there and stuff, so we just don't want to make any changes so somebody potentially could lose some business.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I know that the variance is a condition of the new lease on for the new facility. And so should the lease expire at their existing operations and we can't secure this new facility, I'm worried that people won't have a place to work. And I do note that a condition of development planning is that if the scope of the use be limited to that described in our application materials, and should that change or increase, that additional review would be required, which I think captures your concern.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the concern is that there's processing that's being requested that we would need to be approving. As you mentioned, power generation, fuel combustion is something that you wouldn't see needing, but it happens to be in here. So unless we go through each of these items, and none of us here are experts, this seems a little bit overextending what you're indicating would happen on the site. And I think for us, we also haven't heard anything about there being a 0 meter setback to the Conservation Authority. We haven't addressed that yet. So I would further the comments. Yes, so we have something from the Conservation Authority. Obviously, they're a significant entity. A lot of emphasis is being placed by Ministry of the Environment. So we would potentially like to see something from them as well. But I think I would follow up to the chairman's suggestion that we defer this, at least for a brief period of time. There's a lot for us to digest. We're concerned about what may happen to the neighbors. I know we have one neighbor here that's presented to us that has a concern about having purchased property unaware of what might be happening. And I think this is significant. I think for myself, I understand this area is designated for these kinds of uses. So as much as I don't like to know about them and don't want them to be occurring, they must occur somewhere. So you have some sympathy in that regard. But I think it's just, this is a lot that's being requested. So my reference would be to the chairman that I would be in support of deferring this.
And if I might add, through you, Mr. Chair, I have difficulty figuring out how 300 meters to zero is minor, and I think that's an appropriate adjustment to zoning to be done by people more professional than the Committee of Adjustment.
Okay, as Mr. Crouch and Member Ms. Stoffler indicated, I am also inclined to defer this application, but at the same time, I would like to see some new information on this, and would like to be a little bit more informed, even though I personally feel that it's not under committee's jurisdiction, but as a city, if we can get some more light on all these variances being requested, if we can have some more information and all parties can talk to each other, maybe there might be some less concerns in the next meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Please go ahead.
I'll just pose it from here if that's okay.
Sure.
The gentleman who spoke, who works at the facility, talked about medical waste. It can be stored for 12 hours in a truck with a refrigeration unit. And if I heard correctly, that non-hazardous waste can be stored on site. I'm not sure if he said in a truck for 30 days. That's a concern because if the MOE is saying, yeah, you can do that, and they get a license, and even though staff here are saying you can't, I don't know how we control that. I mean, there are a lot of questions. The applicant has then referenced materials that have been filed. We don't have those materials. They're not part of the staff report. They're not attached to it. So I'm not sure how we go forward. But I think, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Crouch, through you, Mr. Crouch knows that we often don't see eye to eye on many applications here. And I respect him for advancing his positions, and I know it's mutual. I think he's kind of hit on something in his last comment. We're going from 300 to 0, and we're dealing with something where certainly the city has a role, but I'm now questioning the whole ministry process of granting the license. And to Member Doffler's comments about the how extensive this application and ask is, I have a feeling that once this ask is made and if it's approved, all of us are going to have very little control about what's happening here. And while I might sympathize with, you know, the need for this kind of a facility, there is a requirement of 300-meter separation. This isn't the only industrial land in the entire city of Brampton. We have hundreds, dare I say thousands of acres. And, you know, a lease is coming up. I have a lease coming up on our Markham office. You know, we extend it a little bit, we find
Do you
other
have the
space.
similar business there?
Pardon me?
I said, are you in the similar business there?
So, I mean, those things happen, and I can appreciate what they're doing here, but, what they're trying to do here, but I just think that there's still a lot of unknowns here, and it's, I think we're dealing with something that I'm just astounded. If they're gonna put trucks on the property full of garbage, I'd like to know that today.
Yeah.
Maybe they could clarify that, because I'd hate to have the committee want to approve this, and then when we go through the conditions, they say, well, okay, as long as you store trucks in compliance with the ministry requirement, we could have trucks with refrigeration units cooking garbage, medical waste inside. We're not on for that.
Okay, so in my, after listening all the parties, I think if we can have some more information in near future, so we can make our decision accordingly, and then not just us, I guess all parties will have more information that will help everyone moving forward. So if, are we in agreement for deferral on this application if the applicant is seeking, and at the same time, we have discussed for quite a bit of time now, and I'll be only interested if we will be having the new information in the future meeting, not just the repeat of the things. I'm not really saying that there should be no repetition, but again, more new information would help everyone in saving the time.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd be prepared to support a deferral if that's the choice of my fellow members, although in any other future hearing, I will still wonder hard how 300 meters can go to 0 and be minor. I think City Council should be making this decision.
Sure. That, I guess, staff will answer in the future hearings if it may get defer. Applicant, you wish to speak something, or you would like to propose?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say that we would support a deferral should the.
Any timeline you think you'll be able to get more information? Not particular to any question, but pretty much all the things being discussed here today. So by when do you think you'll be able to provide more information to the staff, so staff can send that information to us and to the neighbor's agent next door?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe a week to 2 weeks would be appropriate.
So having said that, Ms. Myers, what we are looking for the possible in June or in July the 10th?
Maybe July 31st, if it's a couple of weeks.
July 31st?
Mr. Chairman, for what it's worth, when we get this material, we will be working with our clients because they are retaining legal counsel now, and we're probably going to be hiring an environmental expert to review the materials. So I think that there needs to be sufficient time for that to be reviewed before we come back. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Gagnon, for the input. In my opinion, July 31st is 3 meetings from now, if I'm correct, Ms. Myers?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Okay, to the staff, are we okay if July 31st is the next hearing and we can work with all parties?
Yes.
Okay, so.
I think it's far too compressed a timeline, given the fact that there's going to be objections to the change of use. We'll just be deferring it again.
So what's your suggestion, Mr. Crouch?
An indefinite deferral.
Indefinite?
We have other parties involved now, and they'll be out there negotiating and presumably coming back to us with complete answers.
I do understand.
And I don't know if that can be done in 3 to 6 weeks.
I do understand your concerns, but my only thing is, because the owner need to know sooner than later because of their lease expiring in December.
Well, if the owner were prepared to refile for July 31st, they could do so as long as they're doing so in a timely fashion. Indefinite doesn't mean a long time. It could be the next hearing.
Exactly. No, I do understand. So once again to the applicant, July 31st or indefinite would work.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would prefer July 31st.
Okay, so I guess we need to move forward, looking for a motion for July 31st or any other motion. I'm open.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think a timeline is important to the applicant. I think a timeline is not perhaps preferred by the neighbor, but I don't know how much time would be appropriate, and I think the city doesn't have any concerns with timing. So that being said, I think if we impose a deadline of July 31st, that gets everybody who needs to be doing something on this, both the neighbors and the applicants, to do so by a specific time. And if that time a deferral is required because things have moved to a different direction, then it would be between the parties involved to set that. So my suggestion would be to defer the application to July 31st.
So is that the motion you're putting forward? Okay, so motion by Ms. Doffler to defer application A18082 for July 31st hearing. Do we have seconder for the motion? Okay, I'll second this motion. All in favor? Motion carried. So this application has been deferred to July 31st, 2018. I would, excuse me, Ms. Myers, do we need motion for 5 minutes break or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if the committee wants to have a brief recess, we'll just have to set a time when we'll be coming back.
So we can come back on 12:35, Mr. Kraus? Yeah, so just for the, yeah, 12:35, there's a recess and we'll be back. I'll call this meeting to order again. We are back after the short but much needed recess break. So Ms. Myers, whenever you're ready.
Calling application A18084, South Park Estates, Inc. Property is located at 188 Wilkerson Road.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and staff members. My name is Jess Kieran Kaur from Benchnar Associates. We are the planning consultants on behalf of Island Lease and tenant of Unit 10 at 188 Wilkinson Road, which is subject to minor variance application before the committee today. The site is generally located west of Dixie Road, north of Advance Boulevard, and fronts Wilkinson Road. The site is occupied currently by a one-story industrial use building with a gross floor area of 3,100 square meters, 89 on-site parking spaces, and several loading spaces. Within the city Steel's industrial secondary plan, the site is designated industrial, permitting various industrial and office uses. 2 variances are being sought for relief: to permit an office for the sale and leasing of motor vehicles with no outdoor storage, and the second being to provide 89 parking spaces on site, whereas the bylaw requires minimum of 109 parking spaces. Just to provide you a bit of background, Island Leasing currently operates as an office for sale and leasing of motor vehicles and equipment, and has recently relocated their office from City of Mississauga to Unit 10 on January 1st, 2018. It doesn't provide any outdoor storage of vehicles and does not cater for customers' walk-ins or by appointment. So primarily the business runs on fax, emails, and phones. Due to the recent relocation, the company is required to update their registration with the Ontario Motor Vehicle Industry Council, also known as OMVIC, and is required to provide an occupancy certificate issued by the city to accompany their registration update. OMVIC requires the city to mention specifically in the certificate the permission for motor vehicle equipment sales and leasing from the property. While the company currently operates in conformity with the city's zoning bylaw as an office, the company is unable to obtain the required occupancy certificate with reference to the motor vehicle equipment sales and leasing, and therefore requires a variance to reference the office use as sales and leasing of motor vehicle equipment within the requested occupancy certificate. In reference to the second variance, the subject site currently accommodates 89 parking spaces, whereas 109 parking spaces are required. We observed parking usage for 7 days at the site, including weekends, to collate parking use data. It was noted that the parking is underutilized and that there are sufficient parking spaces to accommodate the use of Unit 10 and existing business on site. The variances are being requested to allow the use of Unit 10 as office. However, for the purposes to obtain the registration from OMVIC, the city is requested to reference within the requested occupancy certificate the use of site as motor vehicle equipment sales and leasing. In addition to this, to allow the site to operate at 89 parking spaces. In our opinion, the proposed variances meet the criteria to authorize a variance under Section 45 of the Planning Act, and as such, we are seeking approval of the requested variances.
Please go ahead, Mr. Crouch.
Does your client own this unit, or is it leasing it?
He's a tenant, he's leasing it.
Thank you.
Okay, any other question by committee members? Anyone in the audience wish to speak on this application? Before staff, or maybe staff can clear, or maybe I'd just like to even though it says same, but the public notice mentioned 109 parking spaces versus the application 108, or I assume that's the plus right in front of 108.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, could you repeat that for me, sorry?
In this application, in the public notice, the variance number 2 is minimum of 109 parking spaces.
Mm-hmm.
versus when we go to the application, which is few pages after in my package here. And there was originally 92 parking spaces were required in number 3 on the application. Then it scratched off, then
Yes.
109, and then 108. I believe that's plus.
Yes, so, the reason we had to delete that was because we had to go with the entire, the site, 109, because we calculated as per all the other businesses on site and what they were operating for, and that calculated to 109. And however, 89 parking spaces are currently available on site. So we are sticking to that parking space numbers.
No problem. Staff, could you please go in?
Certainly, I can confirm that the detailed parking breakdown has been provided, and staff have confirmed that it is 109 as a total. The actual total is 108.29, but of course, that requirement is rounded up, which is where the plus is. A good deal of that parking, of course, is attributed to, there is a place of worship on the property, which does require a much higher parking requirement. So overall, the number of parking spaces required for this particular unit would only be 10, 9.73.
Okay, so staff, could you please go in about your recommendations?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff have reviewed the application against the 4 tests outlined in the Planning Act and are recommending approval subject to 3 conditions. Condition 1, that no motor vehicles and/or equipment be stored and/or displayed on site. 2, that the parking reduction only be approved for Unit 10. Any other combination of uses is to be calculated at the applicable parking rate in accordance with the zoning bylaw and shall not exceed 109 parking spaces. And lastly, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Okay, so to the applicant, are you in agreement with these recommendations, the conditions?
Yes, the recommendations agreed upon.
Okay, looking for a motion, if no other business.
Motion to approve with the staff conditions.
Motion put forward by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Mustafa. All in favor? This is approved.
Thank you.
Calling application A18-085, Scott's Trustee Corporation. The property is located at 9025 Torbram Road.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Ashley Kurek, and I'm project manager at IBI Group, and I'm here representing Scott's Trustee Corp. We're requesting a relief from the zoning bylaw for landscape setbacks and building setbacks. You'll see on our on the agenda here, it asks to provide a 2.2 meter wide landscape strip and a 0.52 meter building setback. We'll actually be changing those to a 2 meter landscape strip and a 0.4 meter building setback. Through discussions with city staff, we feel the change is marginal and very minimal with regards to the effects of the site plan. This is done, we're requesting these variants due to a road widening. And so through discussions, staff seems supportive of this. So we would like to request that those 2 variances be changed.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the applicant has requested to amend both variances, and in that regard, I've prepared an amendment letter for your signature.
So I guess the question is, do we need new circulations or something, or no, it's fine under the same, it's just amendment would be fine?
I can speak to that. So these variances are nominal. The requirement for the variances were triggered by a city-initiated road widening. This applicant had significantly advanced the site plan. The scope here is 20 centimeters of a side yard landscaping that opens onto a municipal sidewalk. In our view, that variance is minor, and there's nothing significant about that would trigger a requirement for notification. The second change from 0.52 to 0.4 for the building setback is from a regional daylight triangle. So there'll be no practical or discernible kind of impact of the 12 centimeters reduction that is being sought. And through our discussions with the applicant, a delay of the application this time would produce a significant hardship. I know that's not the primary factor that would be considered, but as it relates to public notification, we feel that sufficient information has been provided and that these are nominal changes.
Okay, so no problem. Committee members, any questions to the applicant? Seeing none, anyone in the audience wishes to speak on this particular application? Seeing none. Staff, please weigh in with your recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff has reviewed this application and considered this application to be supportable, subject to a number of conditions. These include, number one, that the owner finalize site plan approval, execute a site plan agreement, and post any required financial securities and insurance to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services within 180 days, or as extended at the discretion of the Director of Development Services upon receipt of a written request for extension from the owner. Number two, that the owner secure a building permit for the demolition of the existing portion of the building and construction of any new construction. Number three, that the extent of variances shall be restricted to the location as shown in the sketch. And lastly, that failure to comply with and to maintain the conditions of the committee will render the approval null and void. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any question? Please go ahead.
Motion to approve with conditions.
I would just, to the applicant, are you in agreement with these?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Crouch had put forward the motion. Do we have seconder? Seconded by Mustafa. All in favor? Yes, it's carried. It's approved. Thank you.
Calling application A18067, Margaret Curtin. The property is located at 73 Wellington Street East.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, staff, and I'm very lonely up here. I speak on behalf of my wife, owner of the property at 73 Wellington Street East.
Sorry, sir. Your name, please?
Yes, Geza Gaspardi, 73 Wellington Street East.
And you sure you have authority to speak on behalf of your wife? That's a joke, though.
I have her permission.
No problem, please.
You've met her, have you? We're looking to make some changes to the front and back of our house. The house was built, nobody is really sure, probably 100 years ago. The front yard setback for the area that's required is 6 meters. The house intrudes into that as we sit right now, the full 6 meters. That includes stairs at the front of the house that in fact encroach onto the Wellington Street property, the city property there. Part of our application is to remove the existing steps and replace them with steps in the opposite orientation to keep them out of the city property. The front sun porch is existing and has been there for some 50 years in all likelihood. We have no further information on when that was constructed, so that's simply a rehabilitation inside. In the backyard, we are proposing to extend an existing extension by another 6 feet in total. And the side yard setback there does not meet the existing requirements of 1.2 meters, but the extension would be in line with the rest of the side of the house. And consequently, we believe that to be a minor variance. A rear deck would be added to the new extension, and that too would remain in line with the proposed extension and the existing side of the house. Those are the items that are requested, and as we indicated last year in a previous application before this committee, we have the support of all of our neighbors. That was documented last year. We've come back because we were unable to get to an actual construction situation last year. That is our request, sir.
Sure, thank you for your submissions. Committee members, any questions? Seeing none. Anyone in the audience? Seeing none. Staff, please run with your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This application was evaluated against the 4 tests under Section 45 of the Planning Act. It was found to satisfy the 4 tests, and therefore staff find that application A18-067 is supportable, subject to the following conditions being imposed. That the owner shall obtain a building permit within 60 days of the final date of the committee's decision or within an extended period of time as approved by the Commissioner of Planning and Development Services. That elevation drawings to be used as part of the building permit application shall be submitted to the Planning and Development Services Department and approved to the satisfaction of the Senior Manager, Urban Design, prior to the submission of the building permit. The building permit application shall reflect the approved elevation drawings. That the open roof porch shall be of an open style construction and shall not be enclosed. That drainage from the proposed additions and open roof porch be contained on the property, and drainage on adjacent properties must not be adversely impacted. That the extent of the variances be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. And finally, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee will render the approval null and void.
Thank you. Sir, are you in agreement with these recommendations and conditions?
Yes, we are, sir.
Okay, thank you. If no other business, looking for a motion? Motion to approve with the conditions put forward by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Ms. Toffler. All in favor? This is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
If, I believe there's no other business, so looking for motion to adjourn by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Ms. Toffler. All in favor? Yes, it's carried. Meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you.